The sitting is resumed. Honourable Member for St. Philip North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thanks for the opportunity to add my voice to the debate today. I too appreciate the workings of the Joint Select Committee. It has been long in coming in my mind in terms of the amendment. St. Philip North, like most other parishes, but countryside is a little bit different sometimes. A little sprinkle of rain, the bushes everywhere. Let it be overgrown lots, roadside bush. We have a problem with that. I am wondering, while I'm on my feet, if the previous ways we had to debush these roadsides, where each worker was given a particular length to complete in a given day, at a given schedule could not be reinstituted. Right now we see, I have to call the NCC or wherever ever so often to tell them this area needs debushed. If there was a particular schedule that one can keep, I think we would appreciate it. Every member here that spoke so far spoke about overgrown lots and the dangers of it, whether it be vermin, mice and rats, whether it be mosquitoes. Everybody knows the ills that they come with. And this is one of the reasons the bill is important. Now, I agree with the finding of the perpetrators, so to speak, of the overgrown lots if they don't keep the lots tidy. But I have a question, and I'm wondering if it will continue. Members that contribute, not members, people that contributed to the report suggested not putting the fees onto the land tax bill. And I can't help but agree with it. I see issues in terms of late payments and added payments if you're late and how it's to be calculated with an existing land tax bill. I, for one, suffered the consequences of land tax bill, which has up to now has not been rectified. Me and many others still owe, apparently on paper, thousands of dollars. I am wondering, people like me, my lots are never overgrown, but people like me, if they have an overgrown lot, that would be added to the present land tax bill that is already in dispute. I suffered almost embarrassment a few months ago when I was accused of being arbitrarily asking for a reduction in the land tax bill, only to realize that I was right in terms of the calculations. I think this should be a separate fine. I think it should be away from the land tax bill for calculation purposes, and to be able to, if I can't complete my land tax bill, it means I cannot complete the sale of the property if I meet dire straits. And I tend to agree with those who contribute to the bill that it does not have a place, whether legally or otherwise, in terms of the land tax bill. Also, there was an initiative sometime back with regrowing cuscus grass along the roadsides. It tends to keep it tidier. I am not sure who that was under, if it was Agriculture, NCC, or whoever, but I think it was a wonderful initiative, but I'm seeing a halt to it, and I think it needs to be restarted. In my constituency, we have realized several open wells, overgrown open wells that present a danger. Recently, late last year, we had a constituent who fell into a well along Long Bay. The Honourable Member for St. Philip South will be able to tell you, up to now, the well has not been covered. There's a bus stop right next door where children stand. If this cannot be a government where it's do as I say and not as I do, we have a lot of responsibility. I'm sure that the wells have not yet been mapped, but where a lot of these wells are overgrown with bush, and there's a risk of somebody stepping into. There's a crime situation which Barbados seems to be putting itself on the map with respect to crime. There have been known instances where people have been thrown into wells and never discovered for several years or not at all. And we have that risk at least in my constituency, and I'm sure in other areas of the country. I'm not going to be long. The other thing I would suggest is that, yes, we're asking those derelict properties, the government would pay to have them cleaned up and then present the bill to the owner of the property. I wonder if we can use that as a doorway in making income for the government. For instance, I know of several people, whether they live alone or live overseas, who cannot, the word is not be bothered, but their resources are a little different, or they don't trust people to come and clean the properties. I wonder if we can't make this into a money-making income for the government, ergo income for those people who have been trained. I went recently to the graduation for the Project Dawn, and there were many members of the community who graduated from that program, including what they call landscaping. If a resident, for instance, do not overseas, they don't know people here, they don't want to send in money because many experience stealing of money when they send them in. If the government could offer this service, not with penalties, but offer this service so that they clean up properties, the resident pays the bill, people would be employed, small business owners, or what we like to call entrepreneurs, young people, and not speaking about big conglomerates or corporations, but to offer local entrepreneurs the opportunity to be a part of that income. There is definitely room for employment there. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I want to add my voice to it. Many residents of St. Philip North have been calling with overgrown lots. The health inspectors, I must admit, take the calls and record it, but we are happy now to see something actually happen by way of cleanup. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Microsoft Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too rise to share a brief intervention on this very important debate. We are in the middle of settling estimates of revenue and expenditure to come to this honorable place shortly to present to the people of Barbados through this House what we intend, what we propose to do with the resources that they remit to us for our good judgment with respect to provisioning of goods and services to the people whom we serve. Throughout that process that started at the beginning of January, as we meet with several ministries, those of us who form part of the Estimates Committee, led by the Honourable Member for St. Michael North East, the Honourable Prime Minister, I want the people of Barbados, through you, sir, to be aware of the narrative of those conversations. And the narrative of those conversations is very much focusing on the delivery of the basic things that matter to people. In a previous set of remarks that I've shared, and the Honourable Senator in the other place who is responsible for energy and business often makes reference to it herself, I talked a lot about what I call fine work. What are these small things? And we have the capacity, and we will always be able to, as others like to say, I don't particularly care for, but as others like to say, punch above our weight. We, as we have seen, are capable of commanding international attention and the imagination of the world on things that matter with respect to global policy. That is not in dispute. What I am encouraged to see that we continue and in fact increase our intensity to deliver is the small things that matter to people. Sir, this health services amendment bill to which this report speaks represents such things. And when I say small, I don't mean small in terms of the value that they hold. I mean small to the extent that it might seem, or others may like to present it, as something inconsequential. But these are the kinds of things, when you look outside your door, what do you see? What is in your immediate environment? How do you feel? These are the kinds of things that matter. And I will tell you that as somebody who grew up in a village environment, as somebody who grew up in a situation where I could put my hand through my window and touch my neighbor's window, or indeed in some cases touch my neighbor. When you live in such small village environments, on small lots, it is important that around you feels light and clean. It feels like your head is clear, that you can start to think about the life that you want for yourself. These might seem like small things, but I am here to tell you, as someone who has lived it, that when around you is clean, when around you is clear, so too is your mind, so too is your spirit. So too is your sense that there's somebody who cares about how you are living. Sir, last Friday I had the unique privilege and pride to be able to hand over to the management and team of Weymouth Wales Football Club a certificate which guarantees and which certifies that the Weymouth B ground, that is just behind the canal in Halls Road, will now be the home ground of the Weymouth Wales Football Club. And I thank you for those who acknowledge that that is a big thing, because that is a big thing. It's not just a big thing because Weymouth Wales is a Carrington Village Club founded in 1960. And up to a few weeks ago, we're traversing Barbados, begging for space to train. These are the Premier League champions of the country, sir. And I know that those from Britain's Hill listening to me carefully, listening to hear how much I big up Wales, because I also have an abundance of wealth in that regard. Because I have other sporting clubs who are also doing well. Martindale's Road, Britain's Hill, Weymouth Wales, more coming. Because South Central is a sporting community, and of that we are very proud. But I had the honor, and I have to say thank you to the member for St. John, the Honourable Minister of Sports, Youth and Community Empowerment, and the team at the National Sports Council for joining me on the journey to make sure that after we finish the Constitution Road refurbishment and reconstruction project, that we were able to restore that ground and hand it over to that team. And that is important, sir, because, you know, our young people need to be able to look through their windows and not just see an absence of overgrowth, not just know that they are not being exposed to certain diseases and certain risks, but they also need to see their heroes right there where they live. And I feel very strongly about that. But that entire community project, sir, started with the Constitution River refurbishment of the canal. One of the first things I was told when I offered myself for service to the people of Barbados through the Barbados Labour Party and through the people of St. Michael South Central, when in 2016, I started engaging with the community, one of the first things I talked about was the overgrowth in the canal. But I made the point there, sir, to say, yes, it is important to remove bush for the health concerns, for the psyche concerns, for the sense of well-being concerns. It is important to do it for those reasons. But it is also important to do it as the basis of urban renewal in this country. So what did we say about that Halls Road project? We said that we were going to do at least 4 things. The first, to clean and refurbish the canal. And that includes all kinds of things. It includes being able to berth small boats. It includes the guys from the area being able to use their kayaks and go down. It includes all kinds of recreational and other activities. But we said 4 things. refurbishing the canal was the first. The second was that we said that we would make sure that the contractors and the Sports Council and others who had that responsibility, we would make sure that they would return the Weymouth B pasture to a state that would allow Weymouth to have it as their home ground. Number 2, delivered, of 4. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, we said that we would establish the Halls Road Commercial Village. And another woman in my position may not choose to remind the country through you of promises not yet kept. I just reminded of 2 that were kept. But I also have a responsibility to hold myself and my colleagues accountable to what we have said to people we will deliver. I don't run from accountability, sir. This government does not run from accountability. And so one of the things we said we would deliver was kiosks in that area so that the people who are already there can upgrade the circumstances in which they vend, and so that the people who have an interest in becoming small business operators, because not every small business person puts on a suit and tie and goes and sit down in an office or in a little room. Our economy is held up by small businesses. And some people say small and medium sized, but the truth is it's small, it's nano and small. Our economy is held up by that activity. And so we said that number 3 of those 4 things for that area would be to establish that Halls Road Commercial Village. And it must be done. Because it was one of the first notions and ideas that we sat with people from that community and heard that they wanted. And so I will say to you now in this place, if I have to be the one, myself, who completes the work of understanding the costing and making sure that it is one that is sustainable, that it can be replicated in other places, then I thank my family and this country and everybody who contributed to giving me the wherewithal to do that analysis, because I could do it myself. But it must be done. And why? Because removing bush is not just about bush. It is about the circumstances that you create for people to thrive. So that's number 3 of 4 things for that area. Number 4 is that we also realize that a government cannot invest in infrastructure that allows water to flow and not similarly invest in infrastructure that directly affects people and how they live. And I have always said from the beginning that that Halls Road rehabilitation project, as important as it was, and as much as people in the area appreciate it, that it had to be accompanied by other efforts and had to be the basis for urban renewal in that greater Bridgetown area, because that is a greater Bridgetown area. And so the 4th thing we said was that you remove the grass, you make the amenity more pleasant, you return the playing field to the club, one of the most historic clubs in the country coming from Carrington Village. And 4, the roads in the area, as tiny as they are, must be repaved and regenerated. And it's not because people want roads. It is not a feather in anybody's cap. It is not a box that anybody is checking. It is that the basis of urban renewal has to be about making nice where people live, in circumstances where people live in tight conditions like I grew up. So in Halls Road, we said the canal, moving the bush. We said giving back Weymouth Wales their playing ground as a symbol to the young people in that area of what focus and discipline can deliver to them. We said number 3, that the kiosk must go there. And number 4, that the roads, the small gaps on the other side of the road, have to be rejuvenated for the people that live in there. Because when you're spaced tight, and when your money ain't so small, but it might not be as big as you want it to be, and when your family big, and you got enough to do for people, what lightens the load? Feeling like around you feel nice. And so I don't want us to believe that this is just about cutting grass. And any urban renewal in which this government invests, or any government invests in this country, has to put people at the center. I had the distinct privilege, sir, of being the minister responsible for investment along with the Honourable Prime Minister some years ago. And we committed that, yes, the infrastructure was necessary to support how people live. But when we talk about urban renewal, it is everything. It is the quality of the housing stock. It is the wherewithal for people to own or have a stake in where they live. So the transfer of property that was begun by the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act. It is the water and sanitation investments that we also invested in Halls Road to continue to hook people up to sewage or give them sewage solutions if it's not that we are hooking them up to a central plant. It is the full gamut of urban renewal of which we will not lose sight. And I say that without any fear of contradiction, because I am proud to be part of a government that ensures it will not lose sight of the full urban renewal execution in which we must invest. We also said at that time, sir, when I had the honor to be minister with some responsibility for investment, that we were not only looking at the big hotels springing up in the air, but when the big hotels spring up in the air, a part of what they have to contribute is what we called at that time planning gains. And I had the honor of being the minister who was responsible for rolling out the first set of planning gains. And what does that mean? That those large companies and corporations must then be investing in the urban renewal around them. So that we said that there was no way that the Hyatt was going to go up without similarly investing in town around it. People's lives, how they live, what they enjoy. We said the same thing for the hotel that is going up near Trent's playing field. And the commitment of those developers to invest in the maintenance of the field and the surrounding areas. So, sir, this is not just a simple matter. This is about the core of this Barbados Labour Party's commitment to people and how they live. But, sir, the ministry that I now have the honor to help lead is also a part of the conversation. Because we think that grass is grass and it's just waste, and you cut it and you heap it up, and when you get a chance, you come and remove it. But, sir, the property at Newton, the life sciences complex that we've started there, the digital and medical technology hub that people will have seen going up, that is also an example of how we have an opportunity to connect this waste that will be generated to real production. Sir, over 1,000 tons a day of waste is treated in this country. And 70% of that is bio-waste. So things like the same grass that you'll be cutting, the same coconut husks that bedevil us now, that we have to find a way to get rid of sustainably. And so at Newton, what we're able to do, and what Export Barbados has been leading on behalf of the Ministry of Industry on, is setting up a biogas fermentation facility that allows us to take that waste and turn it into energy. And so we've set that model up at Newton as a way to power that building. And that building is set to be, once complete, 80,000 square feet before we get to even putting in the mezzanine level. But that 80,000 square feet now makes it the single largest single-story commercial property on the island. But apart from the economic opportunities that it will provide in the digital economy and the medical technology economy, it is also a model for what is possible if we apply our minds and hearts to wisdom and the future of energy production in this country. And so what we've done at Newton is to say, look, we take the same coconuts from the coconut vendors that we've set up at Newton, we take the waste from there, we take some of the bio-waste, grass, and so on from all of the estates across BIDC Export Barbados and bring them to that facility to be converted into energy. Now, what does it mean that we now will be generating or have the capacity to generate more of this grass and bio-waste from the highways and the byways and the lots that people have abandoned? It means that it is our task now to set up a value chain where we pull these resources, they're resources, you know, we pull this in to other biogas fermentation facilities across the island. No, not everything is for government to do. I won't tell you, sir, that we will go across the country setting up fermentation facilities to take all of the grass that people will generate, but it represents an opportunity for others to adopt the technology and make it a business. It is fully there for us to get right. And I will not seek to preempt the Honourable Minister responsible for the environment, who I know will have much to say on these matters. But the way that we treat waste is a conversation that we have to have. Because more and more we have to understand that it has to be a conscious activity in our lives. The extent to which we generate waste, what kind of waste we generate, and to what further purpose is it put? So that if we are in a situation where we have to dispense with something, get rid of something, it should trigger for us, it should put into our minds, how much of it are we generating? And are we generating the right kinds? The idea of the right kind of waste may seem strange to us. But the fact that this is a process where you're bringing crop straw or grass to interact with manure, it means that these are the kinds of inputs that we need. The kinds of inputs that we don't need are the kinds of things that are not biodegradable. The amount and kind of waste that we generate in industry and at the household level is a part of the conversation that we have to have. This conversation is not just about bush. It is not just about grass. It is about, one, how do we make this the basis of urban renewal, of urban investment, of economic enfranchisement, of energy production, of a new economic model? That is what this thing is about. So for those who would like to suggest that this is a light conversation, well, maybe because their brains are so light, they may only have the capacity to conceptualize light conversation. But this is a consequential piece of legislation. And it begins to open up to all of us opportunities for investment, an appreciation for how do we invest in communities in ways that matter to people. When we clear the bush and debris and the grass, what then becomes available to us in terms of space, sporting opportunities, as we saw with the regeneration, with the handing over the field to Weymouth Wales. Investing in young people through sport. I believe fundamentally in that. And I leave here this afternoon and go to Valerie Britton's Hill to launch another Barbados Football Association National Peace Program hub for the young people in that area. To every week come to a place, learn the fundamentals of the game of football, and alongside that, learn some of the life skills that will allow them to negotiate on the pitch, to understand how to make this real in their lives, to understand how teamwork is not just on the field, but it also has to be brought to bear in your house and with your friends and at school, and as you chart your career and the life that you want to live. This debate is not about Bush. This legislation and these amendments are not about Bush. They are about how are we investing in urban and rural renewal and regeneration and economic opportunities for the people of this country. And with those few words, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for St. James South. Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you very much, Your Honour. It's my pleasure to be able to join this debate in looking at this amendment to the Health Services Act. I represent the people of St. James South. And if there is one thing that I get a clarion call from my constituents, it is about this issue of nuisance, vacant lots that are overgrown, the vermin, the mosquitoes, etc. It is a genuine discomfort to my constituents. And they complain frequently and they complain loudly about it. And therefore, this particular amendment coming to this chamber is going to be a welcome relief for them. Because many of those districts have been suffering for years because of the behavior of their neighbors. For example, in many of the developments like Crystal Heights or Husbands Heights or Wanstead, you'll have vacant lots where people have bought a lot, but they're not ready to build. But in the meantime, they're not taking care of that lot. And it becomes a nuisance now to the neighbors. It presents a security risk and a health risk for them. We also have in a number of those residential areas, buildings that were started, homes that were started. And very often behind an abandoned building is a sad story. It could be a story of death or separation and divorce that now makes it difficult to continue, or hardship that has not allowed that family to complete the construction of that particular housing. But then with its abandonment, while it is painful, a painful factor in their lives, it now becomes a nuisance to the neighbors. And what often happens, I find, in a number of our neighborhoods is that if you have a house that is vacant for too long, you can get vagrants going inside and living in there and then becoming a threat or a nuisance to the neighbors immediately around them. So they have been challenged with this problem for a long time. And I can say on behalf of the people of St. James South, they deeply welcome this move to make a difference to how we manage our land and how we manage the health and cleanliness of our surroundings. The other area would be the derelict vehicles. Mr. Speaker, too many. And it's not only the individual who's bought another car and left it in their garage for some time, and then when it was a nuisance to them, they push it outside and push it on the lot next to them. It is also about people who come into the neighborhood and start a business fixing cars and then leaving a lot of car bodies and vehicle bodies scattered in the neighborhood. And the neighbors complain. And it's not only about the health and the risk, etc., it's also about the devaluing of their property because the neighborhood is untidy. Now, nuisance, I want to speak about that. I have found, Mr. Speaker, that over time, there are people who no longer care when they create nuisance in their neighborhood. I am talking about people who don't clean up their animals' feces. I'm talking about people who don't manage their garbage well, or people who carry out activities that generate the noxious fumes in the neighborhood. And although the neighbor may come and share and beg and plead, they are ignored. I myself have stepped in at times to try to reason with that person to say, look, you need to meet your neighbors halfway. You don't have a right to conduct yourself in a way that then creates a problem for their health and creates a problem for their safety. And sometimes, sir, the responses you get can be challenging. There are some people, when you eventually find them and you speak with them, some will quickly clean or clear up whatever it is they're supposed to clear, but those are not in the majority. Some will just ignore you, do nothing about it and say nothing about it. Then there are some who will tell you plainly, it ain't bothering me, it ain't at me, because very often they may be living somewhere else, or they may be overseas, or it may be family property. And what that says to me is that we not only need a Health Services Amendment Act, we need an Attitude Amendment Act for some of the people of Barbados. Because that level of callousness and indifference is unacceptable when you live in a community. From the day you are born in a relationship, you are born into a community, and there are responsibilities that are immediately attached to those relationships in that community. And they cannot be ignored. But there are people in Barbados who feel that they can get away with it with impunity. And one of the things that I've been spending some time thinking about is, how do we change this? Because the whole issue of people's attitude to each other and to their responsibility as a citizen is a cause of great concern. So I started trying to understand what are some of the underlying causes that result in people actually not taking care of their land, not cleaning it, not being able to get through with their buildings and so on. And one of the things is that when people purchase land and they take out that loan, they may not be able at the same time to start the house, so the land stays there. And because they may be stretched financially, they don't have enough money to keep it clean because they're trying to pay off for the land preparatory to getting their house built. Then sometimes, and I find this quite often, there are disputes in families, where families have inherited a piece of property and they cannot sit and resolve the conflict in a reasonable way that allows everybody to at least get some benefit. There's some people who will block the solution, even though it means nobody gets anything, because they're so busy trying to express out their anger, their malice towards a family member that they don't like. And these are some of the most heartbreaking things, because so often that piece of property is sitting there just going to ruin because a resolution cannot be evolved between family members. And then the other issue is where there's unclear land title. Too many of us have failed to write wills. We have failed to go and regularize our ownership of property. And it runs down through generation to generation. Sometimes the piece of property was owned 2-3 generations ago. Nobody remembers the story. All they know is that a member is now living on it, but that person is not the owner of it. And to get it sorted out is now a mammoth task. And so all of these gridlocks occur. That has happened in one of my districts. Nice piece of land. I would love to ask the government to acquire it, that we could put some housing there. Some of the family members would be glad to sell it, but they cannot come to an agreement. And so a number of people cannot get a housing solution because this family cannot resolve their issue to be able to turn that asset into some funds that they could take to go and do something else, or build the houses themselves and sell to the people who are interested in having a home. So that unclear land title problem is there, and these informal arrangements. Then there's the squatting. There are the people who come on the property and don't pay the rent and stay for a long, long time, and people don't take the steps to deal with the matter. And then next thing you hear, the person been living there that long and they have some sort of entitlement under the law to have access or to be given the opportunity to utilize that property. But one of the main things for me, all of this is summed up in poor asset management. And this is a major weakness in our culture, that as Barbadians, and this is where our financial literacy training must also include looking at matters such as these: dealing with land ownership, dealing with your wills, having clear title to your property, and then look at how you are going to use that particular asset. We always tell people, own a piece of the rock. But for some people, they don't understand that when you own that piece of the rock, it needs to work for you. If all you do is buy it and put it down, that asset is now sitting there eating up your money. Not only do you have to clean it, you also have to do the land tax. All the while, it is not presenting you with any particular value because you've not looked at that asset and converted it into something that can help advance your financial circumstance. And so ownership is not sufficient. Ownership of a piece of the rock cannot be the goal, but how are you going to use that piece of rock to help build a base for financial prosperity for you and your family? So, sir, I have some suggestions that I would like to put, because looking at the problem that I experienced as an MP, looking at all the varieties of challenges that have resulted in these unused pieces of land and being allowed to become a problem to the community, I thought to myself, what are some of the things that needs to be done? Now, sir, to be honest, if we're going to build a new relationship between people and land assets, there are also going to be some changes that are going to be required legally. I have a number of people who have properties who refuse to rent them. Why? Because when you want to get rid of the tenant, it is a long and arduous process. Because the law is structured to try to give the tenant the opportunity to keep a roof over their head until they can find something. And this presents a challenge to a lot of landlords. Landlords resort to all kinds of behaviors. Some take off the doors, which they should not. They go in and take the people's things and put them out on the street. And so it creates a problem in the society. And that is because being able to quickly but reasonably work with people to remove them from a property where they're not paying for the rent is difficult. And so there are people who refuse, and that helps to contribute to our housing shortage. Then the cost of regularizing that ownership, because you have to acquire the services of a legal person to help you deal with it. And when you have to get letters of administration, and then all sorts of people come out of the woodwork who say, I have an interest. People from overseas that you never heard about come in to say, well, it was my uncle, it was my aunt, and my mother, and my thing were first cousins and first sisters and all sorts of things. And then you have to go through the legal process of turning up at court every 3 months or so, or whenever you get a date. And a simple land problem can run for 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 years in the law courts. There are very few people who have the stamina to undertake that. And it is cost, because every time your lawyer appears, you got to pay for appearing, even though all the judge does is adjourn the case because something ain't ready. And so all of this makes it really difficult for people to regularize their situation. I believe that this is a very urgent matter in Barbados, because if we are going to help people to become asset holders, we are going to have to come up with some program or initiative where we can give support to families to straighten out these legal matters pertaining to the ownership of land, helping them to get proper title, and making any necessary changes to legislation to be able to enable a balance between the rights of the tenant and the landlord, so that neither one is unfair and therefore become reluctant to engage in renting. Now, there are a couple of things that I've always felt we could do with a lot of the derelict homes that we can do with vacant lots that are not in use. With the derelict homes, I feel strongly that if people don't have the money to restore and put it on the market, if it were at all possible, that if the government had a facility that allowed people to borrow and get the property completed, and then its rental or its sale will then pay back the government, and the person will still have something coming out of that property, rather than having it sitting there, deteriorating, not housing anybody, and not making any money for anybody who owns it. I feel that that kind of program is something that is needed. The second program that I feel is needed is where you have vacant lots. We are trying to build agriculture in this country. And I believe that if we're going to make agriculture occur, if we're going to grow our black belly sheep, if we're going to get people into animal production, that those same lots can grow the fodder grasses. The fodder grasses don't have to grow high that they then become a place, a security risk. But if fodder grasses could be planted and harvested, and farmers now have access to good quality organic food for their animals, this is part of how we would grow quality meat production in Barbados to allow us to be able to expand in our animal production. I also feel that if, for example, you have purchased a property, you're paying it off, but it's going to be 5-7 years before you could build a house, is there a possibility that people could be helped to develop a lease arrangement in which a farmer could use the acre, 2 acres, 3 acres, whatever it is, to be able to grow food and to grow crops, etc. And then a year before the lease is due, to give him time now to make arrangements if he's got to move somewhere, or he has to, or they want to renew it, or he needs to shift his operations. But I believe that we can get much more from out of our land assets if we take the time to really work with our people to help people to understand land sitting down idle is not an investment. You have to do something with it to make it work for you. I think that we have to work on supporting our families and helping them to resolve conflicts, to make sure that they're making the best possible use of their assets. I believe if we can do that, I think that we could have better outcomes in Barbados. And so we need education, educating people on their responsibility of keeping around them clean, keeping their properties clean. We need changes to the legal system to create a greater balance between the landlord and tenant. Families need counseling and support and arbitration so that they can resolve the issues and come up with a solution that allows them to move the land forward. And then I think the most important thing, sir, is that we need enforcement. If it is one thing that has been an embarrassment to me as an MP, is when constituents call to say, we have called the department and reported this nuisance problem and nobody comes. Or the person comes and no action is taken. And the person continues with impunity with the behavior that is creating a problem for neighbors. We have in Barbados to start and enforce certain laws. We are never going to get an orderly, disciplined society if we keep making laws and not enforcing them in a way that says to people, we mean business. And that is something that I think we need to do. I welcome this piece of legislation because I believe coming out from government's determination that once the lot is in need of cleaning and they are put to the duty of clearing that land, dealing with that building, it means it's going to create work and business opportunities for entrepreneurs. I believe that if we can put this in motion, I could see hundreds of young people who are interested in a landscaping business, who are interested in those types of things, having the opportunity through this government program to earn money at the same time that government is making our country clean. So I want to sincerely thank the Attorney General's office for bringing this Health Services Amendment Act. And if we can follow it up with that amendment to our people's values and behaviors, we will certainly get somewhere in having a cleaner, brighter Barbados where all of us, visitor, citizen, residents alike, that we are living in a clean environment in which we've minimized the risk to our health and the risk to our safety. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker.
Mike yourself. Honourable Member for St. Michael South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise also to support this most important resolution that is before the House. Mr. Speaker, sir, I think that this is perhaps one of the more important things that we can discuss because it is real in the lives of ordinary people. And I had a meeting, as most of us will, with the Honourable Prime Minister, and her theme pretty much for the estimates is doing the basics right, getting back to basics, and delivering ordinary things to our people in a way, sir, that is efficient, effective, and allows them to feel a sense of dignity where they live and how they live. And I listened, Mr. Speaker, sir, to the course of the debate. I thank the Attorney General for the manner in which he introduced it and the details in which he went, although we had discussed some of these issues before. And I listened also to the opposition leader who described it as not groundbreaking. And the honourable member for St. George North responded admirably in recognizing what is important may not necessarily be groundbreaking. And this, sir, is a conversation about what is important for this country and what is important for the people that we choose to lead. You know, when I was a younger person, sir, I used to do a lot of community projects growing up. And I remember I had a conversation with a friend of mine once, and he said to me, he who wanted to be in politics at the time, that I spend too much time with the little people. You know, you spend too much time with little people. You need to come to these meetings, and you need to do this, and you need to do that. You know, little people, the little things. You concern yourself with the little things, sir. And I am not the kind of person to cast judgment on anybody, but that has stayed with me, recognizing that in his judgment of who he considered to be little people, he spoke of myself, my brothers, my sisters, my mother, my father, her mother, her father, the residents across the Pine and Wildy, in Beccles-Hill, in Brittleshill, in Bayland, in all the ordinary places, sir, where most of us are just little people. When I have to come to this honourable chamber, sir, and subject myself to the same base conversation around what is high level and what is important and what should be discussed in here and what should not be discussed in here, sir, my mind went to Luke as it did when that man spoke to me many years ago, sir. He who is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. Amen. And he who is unjust is also unjust in that which is much. I do not know how we aspire to hold the highest office or any office in this land, sir, when we can cast these lines, these divisions between what is worthy of conversation, if it is that it is affecting the lives of ordinary people, and that which is not worthy of conversation, sir. We must come into this place now and talk about what? The stratosphere. We must talk about what? Newton's laws every single day. We must talk about, sir, we have to quote Horace and Shakespeare and Chaucer for it to be of value in this place, sir? Or do we come to this place, sir, to represent the ordinary people, sir, who go to the polls to support a government, sir, that will keep their interests at heart? And essentially, sir, that is the fundamental question. It is also, sir, the fundamental difference between this side and that side. That we recognize, sir, that we were placed here to look after the interests of ordinary Barbadians. Mr. Speaker, sir, I spent the last few weeks walking around my constituency. The truth is, sir, when you are a minister, it is very, very difficult to be in your constituency as often as you like. That's a fact. Especially, sir, if you are a person who loves to be among your people, sir. It is also very, very difficult recognizing that on weekends you're at meetings, you know, you're working on legislation, you're working on administrative arrangements, sir. It's difficult sometimes. But when I was in my constituency, sir, and I must tell you, I've never left, and I've told the people to expect to see more of me now that we've done most of the heavy lifting in the ministry. But sir, I was in Beccles-Hill just, I think it was on Monday last week, and again on Thursday. And the conversation was around grass and bush, because this is what they felt was important to them at that time. We were in Bradford's Gap, sir, also in my constituency, and the same thing. People want to know about lots, sir, about how we're going to clear them, when they're going to be cleared. I must also tell you, sir, that while I was in Beccles-Hill having a conversation with what I can only consider the opposition leader would consider to be an insignificant little person, a regular man in Beccles-Hill, sir, whose knowledge and understanding of the situation, sir, was significant, was saying to me at the time that we got to do something about the people who own the lots and are leaving them, sir, to grow a bush at all kinds of heights, sir. And I also remember, sir, that not so long ago, in this same chamber, We had to subject ourselves to a conversation where we were told that certain people did not come here to comfort the disturbed. It is not my role to comfort the disturbed. Look at Hansard. But this is disturbing ordinary people. This bush, these overgrown lots, is disturbing ordinary people. And Mr. Speaker, sir, it is important. It is very important for us to have this conversation. So not only does it look bad when you drive through a constituency, sir, not only does it look bad, sir, but it is also unhealthy. We know this. You might find vermin in the bush, sir. Sometimes different things mix. You get these toxic smells coming, sir, so they affect your health. Mr. Speaker, sir. And those of us who are aware of the broken window theory, where if one thing starts to go bad, if a window falls out, a person may not mind if the door falls out, if the house wants painting. Eventually, sir, what you have are a whole set of slums, sir, or conditions that are not fit for human habitation, sir. You got to fix these things early, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I do not have any real middle-class constituency in St. Michael South. I do not represent the middle class or the wealthy, sir. The people that I represent are the insignificant people, according to the leader of the opposition, who must concern themselves with these insignificant things. So it concerns me, Mr. Speaker, sir, that across Barbados, in many areas of the area that I represent, we are seeing this. And these are things, sir, that I know that we have to be able to address. So there are also spaces that I knew, sir, once upon a time that were affording communities recreation. These are all private lots, most of them. Affording the community recreation, sir. And now a lot of these areas are overgrown. So not only is it unsightly, it is also unhealthy in the way that the toxic smell, sir, could affect people. But, sir, it prevents people from having that capacity to be able to gather and to socialize and maybe to play a sport. And we've seen it time and time again across Barbados, sir. We have to be able to do something about the state of this country. The average Barbadian wants this, sir. They understand, sir, that we all have a responsibility. We are not asking nobody to go and clean their neighbor's lot. We are saying you are responsible for cleaning your own lot. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is not rocket science. We are not asking anybody to go 5 roads down and cut somebody else's grass, although it would be nice if you do it on a volunteer basis. But we are asking people, sir, to take care of their own space. And the fact, sir, that you can agree on the left hand and disagree on the right hand tells me that you are a man at war with yourself. And a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. Christchurch, South, St. John, we don't know. At the end of the day, sir, this is important for ordinary people, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I feel that because this is so important to me, sir, I feel that we have to take it seriously. And whoever is responsible, sir, for doing this work must take it seriously. In our constituencies as MPs, sir, we have to have a baseline. We have to know where we start. What is the status of the constituency now? How many lots are overgrown? You know, because I was having a constituency meeting with somebody, they told me, but you probably ain't got no overgrown lots. So true as John 3:16, last night when I was driving home, I counted when I turned the gap to my house. Between the time I turn off the road and my house, there are 15 overgrown lots between the main road and my house, sir. 15. Which tells me, sir, that all of us have a responsibility to be able to do this. This affects every single Barbadian, Mr. Speaker, sir. This affects every single Barbadian. So we have to start with a baseline. What is the status in my constituency? I want to know what is the status in Britons Hill, in the Bayland, in Paddock Road, Dalkeith, Darrells Road. How many lots we have now, sir? Whoever is responsible for doing it must monitor it. How many lots have we cleaned in the course of a week? How many lots have we cleaned in the course of a month, sir? Because this is serious business. Just as we measure and quantify the things that we do, sir, because I am saying that this is as significant as any other work that we do in this place, sir. we have to quantify and measure the interventions that we are putting in place, sir, in terms of how we are improving lives for ordinary people. There are some cases, sir, we're going to have to offer support, especially where persons are elderly or persons are disabled, to make sure that they have the wherewithal to be able to keep the lot clean, sir. And this must be a developmental approach, sir. And I say so because, you know, sir, in fact, let me speak of me. My vehicle, when it is dirty, which is perhaps more than it should be, but when you clean your vehicle, it feels different. It drives different. You feel a sense of pride when you get in the car. It just drives different. And that's a fact. Any driver would tell you, sir, that once you clean it, when you get in that car up in the morning, it drives different. You feel a different connection with the vehicle. It's the same thing with your community. When you walk into a community, sir, and you notice sometimes you see the height of grass is so, the grass has been high for so long you don't notice it. But you do notice it when it is cut. And you say to yourself, well, this looks a lot better than it had looked when I left home this morning, sir. And these are the things, sir, that we have to be able to do to make sure that we build out a better community and a better society, sir. My whole thrust in public life, sir, is simply to make life better for ordinary people, sir. Today, my personal assistant was in Dalkeith Village, Mr. Speaker, sir. And we had the good fortune of having persons from MTW visit with us because there is a well in the middle of this community, sir, that was covered just with a rotten sheet of plywood. And that rotten sheet of plywood was overgrown with bush. So it became a danger because people could not see it. And a child, what we can do because it's a private lot. And I fear, sir, in communities like mine and other places, there may be cases where houses used to be in particular locations. They're private still. They're overgrown with bush now. But some of those persons had pit toilets, sir, or they had wells, Mr. Speaker, sir. And even though it is private, it presents a threat to the public. And we have to reach out to many of these people, sir, and say you have to be able to take care of your lot. Now, we've been able to box in that space, sir, for the time being. The residents are aware that we've done the work in Dalkeith Village, sir, but I fear that there could be more, Mr. Speaker, sir. And that brings me, sir, to my last 2 points. I didn't intend to be long. Mr. Speaker, sir, I have in my constituency, as I'm sure you do, a number of persons who live on tenantry land. A number of them. A lot of them, sir, in Bradford, sir, the whole stretch of Reese land is tenantry land. These persons have a certain uncomfortable relationship with the land on which they live. This government, sir, with this BLP government, or a version of it, sir, have put in place the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act, sir. That was meant to empower persons, sir, who previously lived on these plantations land to be able to own a piece of the rock. But there are many cases, sir, where I recognize two things. In cases, sir, there's sometimes where you're having difficulty with the supposed owner of the land, or even where that has been rectified, sir, sometimes the process just takes a little too long, Mr. Speaker, sir. And we have people, sir, in my constituency, I heard it all weekend as I canvassed, sir, through Bradford's Gap. A lot of that land is tenantry land. And they want to be able to own the land, to say that this is mine. People, sir, if they have an uncomfortable relationship with the land, sir, may not clear it. The other point, sir, that I think is also important, sir, is also in relation to landlords. I think the Honourable Member for St. James North touched on it. I have, sir, some persons who own houses, sir, they refuse to fix. First of all, they refuse to cut the grass in the area, totally. So you have grass sometimes growing out of houses where people live. You see grass in the back, sir, you see grass in the front of the house, sir. And you ask yourself, sir, how could a landlord be willing to take somebody's money to offer them the kind of accommodations that they are offering. You can see it from outside. And then, Mr. Speaker, sir, as MP, sometimes you might engage, I'm sure we all do, you might engage a landlord. And the landlords refuse to give permission to the tenants to be able to have the houses fixed. They refuse, sir. And because they offer such low rents, it is difficult for the person to go and find someplace else, Mr. Speaker, sir. While we do this act that I am sure will address the issue of the external conditions on the grass, sir, we also have to be mindful that there are some landlords, sir, who are treating poor people as if they do not matter in this country, sir. You have literally to beg landlords. I've had cases where the Urban Development Commission had conversations with landlords, explained it totally, this land is still yours. We're not taking your land, we just want your permission to be able to make this elderly person comfortable. This person with a disability comfortable. You cannot get permission from landlords, sir. As I speak to you, my mind is on one, sir, between, I don't want to describe it, sir, but along Reese Road, where I have had conversations with the landlord, myself, Urban, everybody, sir. We cannot get this house repaired. Well, originally they were going to repair it until they realized that this is a serious government doing serious work on behalf of the poor. So when it all came together and the government was ready to fix, then the landlord started to backpedal, sir. And we have to be able, sir, to address that. And then lastly, sir, I called my team together. We have people who do the bushing in our different areas, sir. I called them together the other day and I said to them, this is our community, this is where you live, this is where you were raised, this is where your friends live. And this idea that if you have a job that is an 8-hour paid job, or a 7-hour paid job, or a 6-hour paid job, and you feel that you can work 2 hours, or you feel that you can work 3 hours, on behalf of the people, taking the government's money and doing half the work, it cannot work, sir. Because there are people who live in these communities, sir, who depend on them. Now, I'm fortunate because I have a very good crew. But, sir, even in a good crew, every now and then you'll find one or two who determine that they will not do what they're supposed to do. They will not do what they're supposed to do. I had a friend of mine who was working on the team a few years ago. I was down in the Bayland, sir, about 11 a.m. and I saw him riding past. I said, you're not going to work? He said, I finished. I done work for the day at 11 a.m., sir. So we have to hold everybody accountable. This is not a thing, sir, where some people can get off and others can't get off. We all have to be responsible. If the government hires you, or if somebody hires you privately to go and cut their lot, do a decent job. You have some old people, sir, in constituencies, when they hire young people, some of them to come and do their work, they're frightened to talk to them because of the way the young people talk back to them, sir. And we have to say that that is unacceptable in this country, Mr. Speaker, sir. And then lastly, sir, the last point I want to make is in relation to the volunteering. From time to time on weekends, I might gather a crew and we go and we do different people's houses, sir. We clear the bush. But with the best will in the world, we would never get around to all. But on a street, in every single street, Mr. Speaker, sir, if a couple people get together, because they will say, oh, look, the government want tax so-and-so, they ain't got no money. But if a couple people get together who live on the same street and determine that they want to be of use, then they could easily make their communities look a lot better, sir. Easily. And I'm thankful for the persons in my communities who I see do it, sir, but I want to encourage more of it. I think, sir, that at the end of the day, we don't have, two Barbaduses. This is not St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Antigua and Barbuda. This is just one. This is not the Bahamas made up of a million little islands. This is just one, Mr. Speaker, sir. And we all have a responsibility to make sure we keep it clean, to make sure that we keep it clean so that our residents are healthy, make sure that they're happy and healthy, sir. and to make sure that Barbados is the best version of itself. This legislation, sir, is not going to punish anybody, you know. If it is that you cut the grass on your lot, this legislation would never cause you any disturbance. The only way this legislation causes you a disturbance is if you determine that you don't want to cut the grass on your lot. Is if you are the person, sir, bringing the offense. So I support this resolution, sir, in its entirety. I commend it to the people. I know the people of Barbados want it because they've asked me for it. And I look forward to see it being rolled out over time in this country.
Honourable Member St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the Joint Select Committee's report on the Health Services Amendment Bill and the proposed health services regulations, and rise in support of the substantive bill as well. As has been said by previous speakers on the government side, this legislation has been very long in coming. That's the truth, sir. The Honourable Member for Christchurch, West Central, for example, will tell you every other month at one time I used to be calling him and asking him, when this coming in? When we bring in this to Parliament? It's taking too long. That is the truth. I remember, sir, when I was a young member of the Barbados Labour Party, newly joined, it was either 1994 conference or 1995 annual conference, shortly after we reclaimed office in this country. The annual conference, I remember, was at the Polytechnic, Samuel Jackman Prescott Polytechnic, and Sir Harold St. John, now deceased, at that time already a former Prime Minister, this issue came up about clearing and keeping lots clear because they were a nuisance to people who lived near them. And Sir Harold, I think at that same conference, the then Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Owen Arthur, now deceased, announced that Sir Harold would get the highest national honour. And Sir Harold stood up at that conference and made this same proposal that government department should be allowed to clear people's lots of bush where they were a nuisance and add it on to the land tax. So this has been 30 years in coming, sir, 3 decades. That is the truth. I believe that we all know, because all of us have parish speech within the space of a year, and at virtually every parish speech, this issue is raised by a constituent, at least one constituent, about the nuisance created by their neighbouring or adjacent lot, which is causing health hazard to them, the vine spreading, insects and rats, etc., if there's a derelict building on the neighbouring lot, and calling on government to do something. The first St. James Parish speech, a lady with disabilities who I know well chastised me, that is the truth. She said that I won't send people to clear her neighbour's lot, which had a derelict building on it for years, nothing going on. And the truth of the matter, I had, during COVID, asked the 360 or 720 workers from NCC to go on the lot, to clear it, and they did go on the lot, and within an hour of them being on the lot, some lawyer man turned up, let's say he's lawyer of the owner, and order them off the property. Well, what you could do, you have to get off, as you know, Mr. Speaker. Technically, it's trespassing because there was no legislative or statutory right for any government department workers to go on there. Certainly no legislative or statutory right for any member of parliament to tell anybody to go and clear up any private property. So this legislation is extremely necessary because we all know, all of us in here, that our constituents expect that we have the authority, the power, and reasonably expect that to get lots clear up. And that if you don't get clear up, you don't have any government department you can call and clear it up. They expect you, in fact, to pull money out of your pocket to send somebody and pay for them to clear up their neighbor's lot, that causing a nuisance. But that's the reality of Barbados, sir. As the Honourable Member for St. Michael South just said, this is the daily living of Barbados, the daily reality. And these are the points, fine as they are, which make a difference in the lives of the people of Barbados, and which any caring or thinking member of parliament, and of course by extension cabinet and parliament itself, will address, because it makes a difference in the lives of their constituents. Needless to say, in the aesthetic value and beautification of Barbados itself, which of course many of us have said many times needs cleaning up in many ways. We tried to do that, of course, during COVID with the increase in numbers of workers at NCC and the ash cleanup workers, etc. But there was no legislative or statutory authority for anybody to go on anyone's private property and clean it up. And we all know, sir, that there are, I think I had heard sometime, I obviously don't know the latest figures, but at one time about 15 or 17,000 derelict properties in urban Barbados alone. I believe that figure certainly was given in the first decade of this century. It may have increased by now. The Honourable Member for St. James South, in her intervention in this debate, spoke with tremendous clarity, and I commend her on some of the legal complications involved in this issue, where because of lack of wills and disputes relating to ownership of property when someone dies, and lack of proper title to property, even though under the last Barbados Labour Party administration, title to properties, title proceedings, Land Title Proceedings Act was simplified a bit from what it used to be before under the fictitious foreclosure suits process, that we still have a lot of title disputes relating to property in this country, as you well know, sir. And therefore, people sit down and the property goes to ruins, or the house that was on the property becomes derelict. But a government that is mindful of the daily living of its people can't just sit by and be idle. So, Sir Harold must be very happy in his grave today to see this Parliament, which he served so magnificently for so long a period, from 1966 to 2003, off and on, now debating to bring this into legislation. The penalties, administrative penalties, sir, no one of the mandates that the Joint Selection Committee gave itself was to see whether they were disproportionate and or unreasonable. The committee came up with the view that they were not, and that they were adequate. $300, sir. That is minor. That is 3 Sir Grant lease. You spend that. You spend more than that in a dinner for 2 on a night. The $10 per day extra penalty. Again, that doesn't hurt you too much, sir. And that's in line, for example, with the penalty which is payable on failure to file, for example, an annual return at the corporate registry, or when you file it after the date. As you know, Mr. Speaker, you pay $10 per day penalty. Of course, you have the relief board there, same relief board as established under the Land Tax Act, by which any individual who thinks that this penalty, this sum, is excessive or is difficult for them because, for example, they are elderly or on a small pension, or, person with disabilities, for instance, there's provision for the relief board and appeals from the relief board to the High Court judge if necessary, which is a good thing and which certainly I support, sir. But I think the whole point is that the thrust of the legislation is that we don't want to have that anyone is going to be imposed with having to pay a fine. We want you to clean up your property because it has to do with national pride. It has to do with cleanliness. It has to do with just making Barbados the best place that we can be, and environment and the state of our environment and of its component parts right down the communities and the private properties is essential to that. When I was an opposition member of parliament, I only remember two issues that on the floor of parliament, the then Prime Minister, the then Member of Parliament for St. Michael South, and I agreed on. One was that government really and truly was negligent in paying people compensation when the compulsorily acquired a property. Governments with a small G, sir, both Barbados Labour Party and Democratic Labour Party past governments, we agreed on that. And on this particular point, that people need to be penalized for helping to make Barbados unclean and in a sad state of repair. Because he spoke about a time, I think, when he was being obviously chauffeur-driven in the Prime Minister's car, and somebody threw something out of a minibus, and he told his driver blow on the minibus and pass it out, and tell the minibus man to tell whoever drop it out to go and pick it up. And I said quite honestly, I can't do that. I don't have any chauffeur or anything, so. But when I see that happening, I get so vexed, because these are the same people who can say how they're patriotic and nationalistic and on Independence Day wearing Barbados colors, but throwing things out of a car window, out of a minibus, without regard to the damage that it can cause and to the untidy state that it leaves Barbados. So I'm happy to intervene in this debate. The Select Committee made the change in terms of minister, and as you will know, Mr. Speaker, a lot of our previous legislation from the 60s and 70s and 80s sought to define a minister as being, for example, Minister of Health, but obviously a Prime Minister has the total prerogative to assign, you know, different government departments to different ministries as time goes by, and therefore it has come along that to precisely define minister under a particular category of ministry has become shrewd over time in a lot of cases, and now the drafting practice within recent times has been to leave minister blank, and it then falls to the Interpretation Act to say who the minister is, and obviously minister in an act then becomes the minister who has responsibility for that particular statute, and hence the committee has recognized that and has removed the precise definition of minister, I think Minister of Health, from this legislation. One of the complexities, of course, is that many of the vacant lots in Barbados are owned by people who live overseas. We know that, either Barbadian born or non-Bajans. That's the truth, they don't live here. Some of them buy or acquire the lots, well, either buy or they acquire by way of succession, and don't look back on them. And that is not good, because in the countries where they live, North America, in a lot of countries, they can't leave the properties, so that is the truth. So why do it in the country of your birth? Thankfully, where I live, I had people who cooperated. In front of me was a lot until recently owned by a Barbadian living overseas, and always in great need of debushing. And I had to go to the land tax or call the land tax to find out who the land tax bill is sent to, and write the person out in England and tell them, you know, this ain't good enough. And they cooperated. That's the truth. They told me, yeah, okay, well, Mr. Dixon, whenever you think the property needs clearing, give me the name of a landscape person, a gardener. I gave them, and I would call that person. The person would send them photographs of the state of the property and give them permission or instruct them to clear it and pay them. But not everyone is so cooperative. In a lot of cases, you can't even find out, to be truthful, who the owner is. Because, you know, somebody might be getting a land tax bill or the land tax, say the land tax bill remains unpaid, right? And of course, we know that ultimately, BRA has the authority legislatively to sell the property for mounting arrears of land tax. But as I said, the government doesn't want to have to sell out anybody's property for failure to pay, whether it's land tax or failure to pay any administrative penalty. We just are calling on people to keep their properties in a state, in a normal state, that it is not a nuisance to anyone. You know, in a lot of cases, so regrettably, too many people really don't care about anybody else, you know. Just think about the self. I don't even think, in a lot of cases, they really have deep care or respect for the families, the wider family. But it doesn't impact on their mental composition or their psyche, how their acts or omissions affect others. And this is a prime example, and this is why Parliament now has to intervene, and has intervened after a very long time in passing legislation to address this problem. I note, sir, that the Act also binds the regulations. In fact, it says binds the state, which means that the penalties, of course, apply to the state as well, and this is good. It is therefore incumbent now on government and its institutions, its departments, statutory corporations which own or manage land to have it clear as well. Because, of course, government has to set an example in this scenario as well. The 21 days notice to remedy the breach, I'm satisfied that the arguments given by the health officers and the environmental officers in the report are satisfactory in terms of the period that the Aedes aegypti, for example, can take to breed. 21 days, I'm satisfied, is long enough, even though a case was made for it to be, slightly longer, 28 days notice. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I am very happy to support this bill and the report, which is, together with the bill, as it seeks to address what is really and truly a tremendous national challenge, a crisis, I would almost say, one that affects each and every of the 30 constituencies which we have in this Parliament. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Honourable Member for St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I bid you a warm and pleasant good afternoon, and I want to assure you I don't want to tarry long on this matter. I want to begin, sir, by thanking the Honourable Member for St. George North for her excellent work in making sure that this piece of legislation has been able to get here. And equally, sir, I want to lend a voice of congratulations and thanks to all the individual members of the committee. Having had the opportunity to chair a similar type of process when it came to the question of vending in Barbados, I, sir, feel a certain sense of hurt when I listened to the Honourable Member for Christchurch South. And it is on that point that I felt I was almost compelled to speak in this matter. Because, sir, what we heard today was, first of all, fallen from the lips of an Honourable Member who is charged, even though the Constitution of the country does not recognize a political party, he is charged with leadership of a political party. And not only is he charged with leadership, Mr. Speaker, sir, but he has, in very recent times, named candidates for general election, no less, on behalf and in the name of that political party. I will not at this stage comment on the fact that he is not among the ones named, but we will come to that in due course. But Mr. Speaker, sir, what worries me is that we can take a lot for granted in this country without recognizing the exceptionally critical period of time in which we live. And if what is happening in the major power of the North Atlantic has taught us anything, it should be that those things that we have traditionally taken for granted in the context of democracy cannot any longer be taken for granted. And Mr. Speaker, sir, it alarms me when, with absolute disdain, an Honourable Member, distinguished by virtue of, first, leadership of a party, second, the capacity to name candidates, has not spoken outside or inside of this place to what those candidates will stand for, but speaks, Mr. Speaker, sir, in the most dismissive and derisive of tones about a model of governance which this government has reintroduced into the lives and into the political system and the political psyche of this country. And I make no apology for it, sir, because I have served in this place now for 24 years. And it was not a common thing. In fact, it was the rarest of things for bills to go to committee stage. And you at committee stage, Mr. Speaker, sir, treat, in the absence of a local government arrangement in this country, a local government arrangement, sir, had it existed, would give the ordinary man voice, where now he has none. So what does democracy mean for the ordinary Barbadian citizen, Mr. Speaker, sir? That they are urged to go into a polling booth once every 4 or 5 years and put down an X, and forever thereafter hold your peace? We say no. We say that democracy must mean that the ordinary man be given a voice. And so therefore, on matters such as this, which can test the rights of citizens, Mr. Speaker, sir, and call for balance between the rights of citizens on one hand, or rights of individuals, property owners on one hand, and the rights of the collective, the broad base of the society on the other, that there should be an exercise in which the voice of citizens is allowed to participate in the shaping of legislation. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, that is not any rarefied and difficult concept, but it is, in my judgment, fundamental. It is, in my respectful submission, sir, fundamental to the Barbados of tomorrow and the Barbados of today. And I cannot understand for the life of me, sir, how you can, in dismissive and derisive tones and terms, conclude, well, that ain't a serious work. That could have been done in a day. Mr. Speaker, sir, the voice of multiple entities in Barbados was invited. The written submissions of multiple entities in Barbados was invited. They were then brought, as we did with the vendors' bill, sir, into the Parliament to participate in shaping legislation that will impact them. How on earth is it, sir, that 1 week you stand before a country and you name candidates, and then the next week you behave as though the democratic process, what is this? What is it that the candidates are standing in the name of? If this, the root of democracy and democratic practice that we are demonstrating here today, in the most fundamental of levels, in the most fundamental of ways, by bringing the average citizen into this place and giving the average citizen that which he did not have, which is a voice in shaping legislation, is to be treated as though it is irrelevant and unnecessary and undesirable. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, I take a very dim view of that. May I speak to you now, sir, as one who has had to do a little bit of lecturing on these matters at the University of the West Indies and tutoring. Because, Mr. Speaker, sir, there are a few fundamental principles that seem to have escaped the lead of the Democratic Labour Party. And woe betide us. That is why I make reference to the lessons we can learn from the North Atlantic and the major power in the North Atlantic. Because democracy, sir, is nothing that you can take for granted. And when you unleash those who perhaps do not pause sufficiently for thought onto a nascent and unsuspecting public, there can be unanticipated difficulties for a country. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, first of all, this process, which was presided over by the Honourable Member for St. George North, is about broader and more diverse, having a broader and more diverse array of citizen participation. It is more representative and it is more inclusive. And I do not know what the position of any member of this House is, but this honourable member, Mr. Speaker, sir, will stand and if need be will fall on the side of deeper representation, deeper participation, and greater inclusivity of the people of Barbados in shaping policy. I believe, sir, that that is what this government is about. Beyond that, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is about representative input on the basis of decisions which are defensible. And let us be very clear about that. We are, by way of the Select Committee, reaching into the public of Barbados and saying that we want to, first of all, identify, and secondly, we want to engage the views of those persons who might otherwise be overlooked as being underrepresented groups in the society. We just heard the speech of the Honourable Member for St. James North when he made reference to the Parish Speaks exercise, another inclusive or rather demonstration of inclusive government introduced by this administration. And the Parish Speaks exercise that took place at Frederick Smith Secondary School in St. James, Mr. Speaker, sir, to which he alluded, and maybe he was too modest to say, that the lady who quarreled with him publicly, another reality of the way in which democratic practice should take place, because we are here, sir, as servants of the people, and if a constituent has a challenge, the constituent is entitled and should be encouraged to speak directly to the representative, either in public or in private, so that we can have a respectable, respectful, and mutually beneficial discourse. And that took place at that Parish Speaks. But what was not said by the Honourable Member, but that which I will say today in the context of understanding how governance must work when we talk about making defensible decisions, Mr. Speaker, sir, and identifying and engaging entities in this society who are otherwise underrepresented. Mr. Speaker, sir, that lady spoke from a wheelchair. And she explained to us that she was in a wheelchair as a result of an ailment which she contracted as a result of certain vectors attacking her due to the untamed bush, due to the place next door being virtually uninhabitable, but she in an aging stage of life. Unable, and I will come to this point further, unable to look after the place next door on her own while maintaining her own property, succumbed to an ailment that has put her in a wheelchair, has kept her in a wheelchair, and for all we know may keep her in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. This nonsense that we were treated to today by the principal spokesperson for the Democratic Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, sir, flies in the face of the fundamental principle of governance that you have to govern on the basis of defensible decisions. And we've come to a point where we are balancing the rights of a property owner on one hand, who previously in Barbados felt that he had no obligation to anybody else. If between the four walls of my compound, I let tall grass grow while I live in England far away. And that's not new, because we all grew up reading the history of this country, and we know that they had absentee landlords all through Barbados. Some were extremely wealthy, so wealthy in fact that while they were living in luxury, the lap of luxury in England, people were suffering down here, and there's that same mentality at play today. But what I never thought that the Parliament of Barbados would be treated to is the voice of a representative of people in this place who would say that the effort to ensure that we reach out into the community to identify persons who are a part of underrepresented groups, like the same lady I just referred to, sir, that type of process should be dismissed as irrelevant and a waste of time. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, I come to the next point, which is that part of this approach to governance is about enabling us to do some equity mapping. And what do I mean by that? I mean, sir, bringing fairness to communities where there is a disproportionate impact with respect to certain problems, and the community of people impacted negatively are not recognized or do not benefit. Well, Mr. Speaker said there's a real problem, Because in places that are called so-called middle-class Barbados, there are a lot of people who in their prime of life work hard, put aside money, and bought properties. Good Bajan citizens, noble and true, put down $250,000 or $300,000 in a property back then that, yes, may be worth $1.5 million today. But with the effluxion of time, they are no longer 30 years old and working hard. Some of them are 65, 70, and 75 years of age. The children have moved out. Sometimes the children living overseas, Mr. Speaker, sir, and they are so-called middle-class people. But the reality of their day-by-day existence is that they are existing, sir, in circumstances of genteel poverty. At age 75, you're not in a position, Mr. Speaker, sir, to go and pull out your lawnmower and go next door at the neighbor on one side and the neighbor on the other. As I have seen happen in places like Bagatelle in my constituency, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I have seen happen in Prior Park in my constituency, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I've seen happen, sir, in Hoyts Terrace in my constituency, sir, in the upper reaches of Fitz Village, Mr. Speaker, sir, in Appleby Gardens, Mr. Speaker, sir, and I could go on and on. It is a reality that is seen in every constituency with the so-called middle class of Barbados. But these are people too. And yes, many are old, and some are living alone because the husband passed away 5 years ago. So what does the old lady do? How is she, Mr. Speaker, sir, to ensure that the grass next door that was one time was 2 feet tall, but is now 6 foot tall? The tall vines and things that coming over at her, allowing for there to be a walkway virtually for the rats to crawl on to get over by her house. How does she shield and protect herself? Is it that she's to rely on personal expense to do it? Or is there a duty now on the part of the state in the context of equity mapping to identify those people disproportionately impacted and to create a policy intervention which is sufficiently targeted to bring relief and remedy to that situation? And Mr. Speaker, so I didn't come here to speak long or to hold a tutorial, but these are the fundamentals of governance, as I understand governance, sir, that must take us forward. Further forward, I imagine, than naming 15 people and saying, look, Sima here is a candidate. A candidate for what? A candidate to do what? A candidate for who, sir? And then, Mr. Speaker, sir, there's the balance of interests. It alarms me, sir, that something as fundamental as human rights arises in this matter, in this debate, and is treated as a nonsense. Because we are balancing, Mr. Speaker, sir, the rights of local persons, in some cases, with the rights of an owner of property who live overseas. And you can't discriminate. You are a property owner. You have rights under the Constitution of Barbados. But the balance must be there, Mr. Speaker. And I know I have to remind you, you sir, practice law. No, the Constitution of Barbados Act, Section 16. No property of any description shall be compulsorily taken possession of, and no interest in or interest over the right of a property of any description can be compulsorily acquired, except by or under the authority of a written law. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, how then does the state navigate its way around circumstances where a negligent property owner, derelict in duty, indifferent in attitude, is causing, by virtue of his negligence, indifference, and in some cases his arrogance? How then does the state intervene in order to protect the people in the community who are so closely and directly affected by his acts or by his omissions that they ought reasonably to be borne in mind when he is creating those acts, sir, or causing those omissions? Is there not a duty, even at common law? I believe that, sir, the portals of negligence the categories of negligence are never closed. And this government, sir, has recognized that and has sought to enter into the portals that were otherwise just dismissed as negligence to say there must be resolution to people who find themselves in those circumstances. Mr. Speaker, sir, I go further. The last 2 points I want to make. The balance, sir, of punitive power and punitive jurisdiction, sir. An owner or occupier may be exempted on the grounds of hardship. It is a fundamental thing. You cannot ask, sir, that this be a matter that be disposed of in a day. What nonsense is that? We are talking now about people's rights, sir. Section 5.1 of the regulation, sir, speaks to a relief board. And sir, let me be clear. The relief board can only preside over financial matters. It can only preside over financial matters. So the issue that would have had to come under the chairmanship of the Honourable Member for St. George North, if she was to do her job properly as she did, and which she would not have done properly had she followed the suggestions of the member for Christchurch South, the errant suggestions of the member for Christchurch South, would be, sir, that the question of whether there is an unreasonable burden being brought to bear on a property owner would never have been entertained. But it is fundamental, because some property owners, Mr. Speaker, sir, may themselves be a disabled person, may themselves be an aged person who is living on a pension and unable to discharge the responsibility that the legislation baldly, B-A-L-D-L-Y, baldly suggests they must do. So what happens to great-grand-grand? My great-grand-grand, or your great-grand-grand, sir, who at age 85 is the only living member of the family, but got this property, but is not able to discharge the responsibility? Is she not entitled to make a case for an exemption based on a hardship? And is that not a matter that should normally and logically engage the minds of a government that is seeking to intervene in a sector that otherwise was a greenfield sector that no government before in the history of Barbados condescended to look upon? But we are to come in here and do a rush job, according to the member for Christchurch South. And this gives the country an insight into the type of governance that you could expect if we were ever in the very unfortunate position of foisting upon ourselves that midsummer's madness, which is called the Democratic Labour Party. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to make the last point, because I have never in my tenure in this place seen this repeated offense against the constituents you represent. He came to the people of Christchurch South, Mr. Speaker, sir, on a ticket, sir, that engaged the community of Christchurch South and pledged to them a pledge which we honored. Pledged to them that we will pull them back from the brink. In fact, sir, from the depths, because the brink had been crossed, the depths of sewage in the streets. Beaches in Christchurch South were closed, Mr. Speaker, sir. The communities resident on the coast of Christchurch had to live in the most offensive circumstances. Here comes a piece of legislation, sir, which says at section 4.1H of the Health Services Regulation 2024, for the purpose of these regulations on any premises, the following are deemed to be a nuisance. And at 4.1.8, sir, any discharge except in accordance with a permit granted by the Minister of the Environment or the Chief Environmental Health Officer of any noxious matter or waste onto any beach into the sea, or, Mr. Speaker, sir, into any water course, pond, ditch, drain, or other place is an offense under these regulations. But the Honourable Member for Christchurch South, sir, pregnant in the knowledge that he serves in a seat, the only seat in Barbados, which has been historically scarred, psychologically scarred by feces running onto the beach. This legislation, sir, which seeks now to give even greater weight to the protection of residents in Christchurch South, Mr. Speaker, he dismisses the effort of the government in the most derisory tones. Mr. Speaker, in whose interest is he serving? If I had not believed the rumor that he had turned his back on the people of Christchurch South and was seeking life elsewhere like a political nomad, Mr. Speaker, sir, I would now be compelled to believe it, because it could only be true if you are now even going to say that protecting the people of Worthing Beach from a repeat type of activity is a nonsense. And it should be dismissed. Little small matter that could dispose of in a day. And Mr. Speaker, sir, it tells me that there are no lessons learned on that side. It tells me that there's not a feeling, even when you leave here and go over there, it is as though you are washed in the blood of something other than the Lamb and have become something unrecognizable, a form of monstrosity, Mr. Speaker. And it disturbs me that no lessons have been learned. I did not intend to come here today, sir, to participate in this debate. But after I heard that which fell from the lips of the Honourable Member for Christchurch South, pro tempore for the time being, I felt, sir, that it was necessary to lend my voice in support of this matter, sir, and I pledge my unswerving support at the point of the vote. I am obliged, sir.
Mr. Speaker, sir.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, thanks for the opportunity. Just let me, first of all, thank the learned Member of Parliament for St. Joseph, the man with the white beard, who introduced this resolution this morning. And as I thank him, I also want to thank him for giving me the opportunity to wrap up a debate which I would consider consequential, which I would consider, sorry, I preempted. I would never take that privilege from my good friend in my Parliament, President Michael South. But Mr. Speaker, sir, I just want to thank him for introducing an important piece of an important resolution, and to say that for me, listening to my colleagues, it was indeed extensive. It was a mature debate, a debate that seeks to deal with issues affecting Barbadians where it matters most. And unlike some people, this amendment to the Health Services Act matters most to the majority of people in this country. And we heard from the member who spoke before me talk about the issues as it relates to the effect on neighbors, the issues as it relates to the effect on the health and the threat by leaving areas in a disused state. You heard the Member of Parliament, President Michael North. He spoke about the over $2 million government is investing in the road program. Again, the threats as it relates to the health issues associated with vermins and rodents, and the pressing issues and concerns with the threat to health. My good friend, the Member of Parliament for St. Michael South, spoke not only to the threat associated with the unsightly bush, as he would call it, but also the fact that within the confines of areas that are disused, you may have other physical threats in terms of threats to life and limb. And he also made an appeal for the community to get involved in some form of activism where we become our brothers and sisters keeper as it relates to helping those who cannot do that work, the work as described in the legislation. I am saying, Mr. Speaker, we had a far-reaching debate that touched on a lot of issues. But I want to start with an axiom exposed by a lady. She told me her name is Thelma. I was in St. Philip opening a clean and green park. An elder lady looked out her window and she said to me, "Mr. Minister, I want you to clear this property side of me because every bush could be a man, but every man may not be a bush." I asked her in her good wisdom, because in the twilight of her years, she have understood, she have walked that journey, and she did it probably her way, like Frank Sinatra. But at the same time, with that extensive knowledge, I asked her, "What you mean by that?" She says, "A man may be able to hide in the bush, and I may not know a man is in there. I'm an old lady, looking after my security. I live here alone. But if I see a man down the road, I know he's a man. But if I see a bush or a disused area, I don't know how much men in there hiding to kill me, rape me at my age, and do all different types of nefarious acts." And that brought my mind full circle to the importance of what I would term a consequential resolution that will basically change the dynamics that we are faced with in the country. That's supposed to be, as the idyllic group would call it, beautiful in terms of beautiful Barbados. I've said already, we cannot have songs that resonate across the length and breadth of this country, beautiful and inspired by Cheryl Hackett, and Barbados remain in the state that it is. There's also another song by Bob Marley, and it basically says, "He who knows it, he who feels it knows it." I must say, Mr. Speaker, I am at the fulcrum of this discussion. Not only my ministry, I am at the fulcrum. I am the person who gets the calls from not only all my colleagues, but probably the entire Barbados. The entire Barbados. This is not a trivial matter by any stretch of imagination. This is not an inconsequential matter by any stretch of imagination. I am the person who receives the calls in the nascent hours of the morning, asking me and my ministry to come and remove bush, derelict vehicles, derelict buildings. My officers in the ministry, they also receive the calls, all hours in the night and in the morning, to ameliorate these situations. I am saying, Mr. Speaker, and I agree with the Member of Parliament for St. Michael South wholeheartedly when he said that the responsibility is on the shoulders of each one of us to ensure that we take care of our own property. And he said in his own words, it is not someone else's property that you're taking care of. It is your own property. Now, how can you have a piece of land may value upward of $500,000? You live in St. Philip, Far East, and the land is somewhere in St. Andrew or someplace more northern. and you are enjoying the rustic environment, the sweet breeze of the hydrosphere, in your patio at night, enjoying your twilight years. Those in the dawn of their life may be enjoying it too. But at the same time, persons, because of your irresponsible behavior, are suffering not only from a medical threat or health threat, but inadvertently a physical one as well. Because as I said before, when Miss Talma, look out, I didn't remember the name because at her age I would. Look out her window and said that every bush could be a man, because her security is also under threat. Mr. Speaker, this is a serious piece of legislation. And I want to say, this discussion has been the heart of debates across the length and breadth of Barbados. Every nook and cranny. Persons that have these conversations in the rum shop, on fishing boats, about bush, about derelict vehicles, about derelict houses. This is not something that is in the whimsical mesosphere. My friend from St. Michael South said the stratosphere. This is not in the mesosphere. This is right here amongst us. The conversations are happening amongst us. Every place we go, persons want to know, when are we going to do something about the bush, the disused land that is changing the aesthetics of this country. I've said already, an idyllic song by an iconic group, Beautiful Barbados by the Merrymen. There is no merriment in the fact that Barbados is in a disused state. And there's no merriment to the fact that in the disused state is caused by the negligence of Barbadians who should know better. So equally, government will do what it's supposed to do in terms of legislation, in terms of bringing relief to those persons who unfortunately, because of financial circumstances, can't do it on their own. The Member of Parliament of St. James Central spoke of it. There is a relief board for that. But those were equally what we are saying as that those persons who have the financial wherewithal, in the same way you can buy a piece of property, Mr. Speaker, sir, you know what you're talking about, for $500,000 upward, you can spend $2,000 or $3,000 a year to look after that property, to ensure that the neighbors and those persons in close proximity will not be affected either because of vermin, rodents, environmental issues associated with it, because a disused spot attracts persons to do that which they would not normally do in terms of illegal dumping, etc. You will see a disused land one day, Mr. Speaker, and the next day you see 2 or 3 old cars on it. Familiarity breeds content. Next, you will see garbage put up on it, or fridge, or stove. That is the nature of the beast we are dealing with. So it's incumbent on every single individual to look after their own property. But government equally has a responsibility to lead from the front. We've said over and over again, we are prepared to lead, but at the same time we are asking persons to join in the effort. Join in the effort. We cannot have, Mr. Speaker, a successful Barbados, one who thrives on sustainable development, unless we understand and respect the plights and the 5 plights associated with it. Partnership is one. People, peace, prosperity, prosperity, peace, planet, partnership, and people. 5 plights. And all of them must work together if we are going to realize the goal of sustainable development by 2030 or before. Partnerships. But what is government doing in the meantime? I want to let the country know that we have started a number of programs. I had thought about the tree planting one. But I never once in my life, ever as minister or otherwise, said to Barbadians that government planted 600,000 trees. I never said so. Or this minister planted 600,000 trees. I'd be a liar. And I would never ever want to be considered such. I reserve that for the devil. The book of John 8 verses 44 speak of the devil having that profound ability to lie. I am saying, Mr. Speaker, that the 600,000 trees were planted in partnership. The word I used before, an important plan of sustainable development. Partnership with a number of organizations across Barbados, including and not limited to the Walker's Reserve, which was once a quarry. We started a partnership with Walker's Reserve with the planting of trees across Barbados. Along with the Clean and Green program, I must tell you, we have now had 110 clean and green sites, which were once disused property in Barbados. 110. With plants planted on each site. Along with that, schools across Barbados, community centers across Barbados. We have had every year, for the last couple of years, our national tree planting competition, which would plant about anything between 20 to 30,000 trees in one fell swoop. We've had the home garden beautification competition, again every year. We've had relationships with the Prince Trust, Princess Trust. We've planted across the botanical gardens, as you know it, a beautiful oasis. And everybody who understands the balancing of humors can go in the garden and enjoy themselves either Saturday, Sunday, any day of the week, because we understand the importance of having a space so people can recreate and do that which we know Barbadians enjoy. We've planted trees for coastal protection. The Gullies project, which will be planting more. And of course, around our highways and sports facilities. 600,000 trees scattered across the breadth of Barbados. And in the Gullies project, we have made a determination to rehabilitate the Gullies with the fruit trees. So that the Member of Parliament, and we have started the Gullies project as well, and it's unfortunate that we have to be, government now has to put and employ persons to clean the gullies. I want to admit to you, when I visited one of the guys were taking out 80 bags of garbage by the hour. 80 bags! Because of the maladaptive patterns of behavior associated with Barbadians. Who should know better? Who should know better? Well, there's legislation in the Act, the 1969 Act, the Nuisance Act, which speaks to $5,000 or a 12-month imprisonment for those persons who are found guilty, whether on camera or otherwise. And I'm imploring on Barbadians, they've set it already. Put them take your cell phone pictures and put them and blast them on the social media. Don't only put car numbers on social media and all sorts of nefarious activities, who get shot and what's not, and their families, so the families will get distressed. Put the people who are dumping illegal also on the phone and blast them on social media. Now let us take action, because the legislation is there. I want to say that when we rehabilitate those gullies with fruit trees, recognizing, of course, that we must preserve that biodiversity. We've said it already. We have acquiesced to the Cumberland-Montreal Protocol as it relates to the 23 targets or whatever. Barbados has its own national biodiversity action, strategic action plan, which I laid in Parliament 2 years ago. It was a very detailed action plan with support to what we were doing, ensuring that we are able to liberate by 2030 about 70% of biodiversity by land and another 30% by ocean space. I am saying that the planting of trees must not be seen as a whimsical exercise in tree planting by giving people employment. The importance of planting trees as it speaks to resilience, a word that I will continue to use. As we balance our ecosystems, a word I will continue to use, because it's about the balance of ecosystems that will help us to mitigate the challenges associated with climate change. The only way that the 1.5 to stay alive could be realized by 2045 is if we have the trees which will sequester in a natural way that harmful chemical, the leading greenhouse gas in the world, carbon dioxide, as we know it. Barbados produce about 2 million tons, 2 million tons yearly, 2 million tons. With a good carbon sink that is revitalized, we can liberate from our green environment about 25% of that. Same thing, the blue environment and the marine environment, the hydrosphere, with a good reef and phytoplankton production, the same thing can happen. Another 25%, that's 50%. So from 2 million, get to 1 million with the natural environment. And that is why we have to agitate for the protection and growth of that which is natural so that it can do the job to protect us from the vagaries of climate change. Every single, I've said already, if you plant a million trees can give us from the atmosphere every year for the next 20 years. Every year, about 20 million pounds of carbon dioxide from sequestration of the leaves. 20 million pounds. Very important as it relates. Albeit that Barbados only produced 2 million tons, when the world is producing 40 and 50 billion a year. It's a small amount, but who feels the adverse effects of climate change? Who feels the adverse effect of climate change? Small islands like Barbados. We produce very little, 2 million tons or so. Most is produced from the energy sector, 1.6 million. But who feels the effect? That is why it's important that we are able to regenerate by tree planting, which is not inconsequential, which is very important in our fight against climate change. The triangulated effect of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution will be the new apocalypse coming to destroy the world as we know it. That is why we have to do these things like planting trees, rehabilitating our ecosystems, ensuring that we clean our gullies, that we clean our environment, that we stop the pollution, and that Barbados remain clean, green, and beautiful. I am also saying, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we have started a direct program. A program we have not only started, we have intensified, Mr. Speaker, sir, intensified our direct program. We have, based on our report, over 3,000. The last figure I got from the Environmental Protection Department, 3,600 cars, derelict cars in Barbados. Derelict, they can't serve no purpose. The only purpose they serve is give a headache, an unfortunate prolonged migraine headache to my colleague from St. Michael North when he has to deal with the mosquitoes, the rats, and the vermin and all those harmful invasive vectors that we have to deal with on a regular basis. And those cars, those 3,600 cars, we are saying that within a year or so period, we are going to remove so that there can be now form part of the bigger conversation which the Member of Parliament for St. Michael South Central was speaking of when she was talking about circular economy in her speech, when she said that a lot of these things that we are removing, whether it is the green organic material for waste to energy, and we know that the green material and green stuff, we can get about 40 to 60% calorific value. important aspect of the waste to energy component. We are saying in the same way that you can use the heavy metal for export purposes, so we can have that much needed foreign exchange in a circular economy, because that is the way how we should just transition. We need to move from linear to circular. So every single piece of waste, we must be able to circulate it back in the economy in terms of a stream. And that is where what the other R comes in, which is to restore. So you can get energy and other recyclables as well from our waste stream. And that is the conversation we are having. We appreciate that out of every single ton or so of waste, we can create 3 to 5 green jobs with the right programs in place. And that is why that we have started to have the conversation about our waste diversion. And I must say, because there's a call for more extensive legislation from the EPD perspective. And I want to say that CPC has now in its hands the Integrated Solid Waste Management Bill, which will be exposed in this August chamber and in not too distant future by the said minister. EPD is also governed by the Marine Pollution Act, which is just awaiting the stamp from the AG in terms of the regulations. I am saying, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we have a series of legislation on the CARES as it relates to how we will treat to our environment to ensure that just transition is just not a word that is put together because it sounds good, but the importance of responsible consumption and production is exposed at every single level in this ministry. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we have as well a program with our young people, 720 across the land, who's responsible for cleaning properties and ensuring by their sweat expenditure that Barbados remains clean and green. But it's not only for those young men to do, it is for the homeowners to join in partnerships so that Barbados could be clean. I know the Member of Parliament for St. Michael Southeast will speak about her program that she's employing to clean so that the two arms of government are working together and on a siloed way so that we can get the Ministry of Transport and Work cleaning that which is just beyond the road, the curbs in the road area, and the ICC and the workers doing the other areas in a collective way to clean up Barbados. That is what we are saying, because we think that we must lead from the front as a government, but equally we are saying that Barbados must also play their part. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to also speak about our botanical garden, which is a beautiful oasis, and asking persons to respect the area space, the space that will bring much joy to them. It is not only an entertainment hub, it is an area you can go and learn about the different trees. It's an enhanced area for biodiversity. It speaks to the different types of gardens we are building out so that the space which was once bush and remained bush for a number of years can now be a prime spot for residents of Barbados and tourists and all those who will come back home to gather with a sense of purpose and pride that they can have this area as a gym for recreation. Mr. Speaker, sir, there's not much more for it to say, but to fully endorse what was said before me, and to say to Barbadians that we need all hands on deck. All hands on deck. Because this is one Barbados, and the survival of our biosphere, as we know it, will be dependent not only on government being responsible, but on every single one of us as Barbadians to do the right thing at the right time. And the right time is for us now to be responsible statesmen and responsible environmentalists and ensure that our ecosystems remain clean, green, and balanced. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
Honourable Member for St. Michael's Office.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to lend my voice to this debate. I perhaps want to assure all other honourable members that they should be taken by no surprise by the honourable member from Christchurch South's comments in relation to this particular piece of legislation, or indeed the report that is before this place. And I say that, Mr. Speaker, because I too, felt that all honourable members handled themselves well in terms of exposing the position of this Barbados Labour Party as it relates to cleaning up the country and addressing the concerns of the general public. But when I heard the honourable member for Christchurch South attempt to reduce this particular debate to us now having to deal with tall grass, I can only say that my blood starts to boil when I hear these types of comments, that we as big grown people carrying out the mandate of the people of this country will be coming to this place to waste our time and certainly the people's time to engage in a debate about tall grass. And I want to highlight to this country that if first of all, if the honourable member was one known for walking about his constituency, or indeed walking around the country, he would appreciate, as all of us do, that there is a cry from the general public for public spaces, private lots, to be cleaned, not just by government, but by private landowners where applicable. When we were involved in rubbing shoulders up and down the length of this country, and certainly the honourable member then was a participant in that exercise, it certainly was clear to all of us that on coming to office that we had to find a way to grapple with the issues of overgrown lots, and also in terms of not only state-owned properties, and in ensuring that those properties were placed in good condition. Because many of the people who we spoke to, many of our constituents, will constantly pin us down and speak to the issues relating to the conditions of these overgrowth lots, indicate to us the vermin that arises from these areas, the fact that apart from the rats and the cockroaches, that there's also the breeding of mosquitoes on a number of these properties. And this has therefore been an ongoing problem for a number of years. There are certain realities, Mr. Speaker. We come out of a colonial system where when we had sugar plantations and the planters owned these lands across Barbados, the state fundamentally was responsible for taking their revenue and being able to look after various lots of land. We've inherited through many years of progress a system whereby the state no longer owns all of the vast tracts of land, and certainly we don't have the large expanse of monies to be able to maintain in the way that you see the United Kingdom, which was obviously, we were part of a former colony. We don't have the resources to be able to maintain in the way that we may have been able to maintain as a country when we were under colonial rule. So the reality is we have to come to a point where we start to do things differently. And it also means that we have to shift responsibilities and also share responsibilities in the process of making these types of transformation. And I start there, Mr. Speaker, because this is not only about sharing responsibility. It is not only about ensuring that people who own lots that are overgrown look after their particular lots and ensure that it's not a nuisance to other persons. But this legislation, and certainly the outcome of this report, also speaks to the fact that the time has now come in some ways for us to also shift responsibility and share responsibility with others. Government can continue to do certain things and do it well with the limited resources that government has available to it. But it cannot continue to clean the lots indefinitely for persons who have the means in many cases to be able to clear their own lots but refuse to do so. And therefore, that time has come for that, in a sense, shift in understanding of what government, with its resources, is able to continue to do and do well. and equally what the individual homeowners and property owners will have to also do. Because the reality too is, Mr. Speaker, that when we take up resources to clean the many lots in several of the communities, I get calls from Fort George as well in my constituency, others get it in all of the middle class and the high-end areas, for lots that persons who have the means to be able to clean are not doing so. Somebody's overseas in another jurisdiction, or there's dispute in terms of the ownership of the land, and as a consequence, there's nobody coming forward on a regular basis to Barbados to often be able to clear the lots. Or even if the lots are cleared, it is cleared so sporadically that by the time it is cleared, while there is a relief on the part of the residents, there is also great frustration because of the length of time that it has taken to get those lots cleared. I have a lot, Mr. Speaker, where I live, where about 4 of the residents in the area actually come together to clear land belonging to somebody else. That practice is unacceptable, and it isn't because the person isn't in a position to clear the lot, but it is because out of frustration, the residents have determined that they can no longer allow for the persons who may lurk in the neighborhood to try to rob somebody as they're walking to and fro, or that the area is darkened in most cases because of the overgrowth of bush. Certainly it is over 5 feet tall. And therefore, we have a number of residents across Barbados who have taken it upon themselves to clear tracts of land that do not belong to them in order for them to peaceably enjoy the neighborhoods and the houses in which they live. That is the reality. That's what we have gotten used to hearing. That is the cry that has come from every ordinary Barbadian, every length, across the length and breadth of this country. That is what we have heard. And that is what coming to Parliament is about, to make the changes that are necessary to allow people to breathe a little easier and to do things not just at the highest level that some people don't even understand, maybe what we do sometimes in here, but also to do things that the ordinary person across every single constituency of this country is able to recognize easily will have an impact on their daily lives. My colleagues spoke about Paris Speaks. We heard about the experiences of people who became sick as a result of rat infestation in properties that were neighboring their homes. We've heard all of the stories in the communities of people speaking about how people lurk behind tall bushes and attack women. In particular, women are the victims often of the challenges that we have in communities with bush. And I think that we often play down the issue of bush, not recognizing that there are some gender issues as well that cause us, particularly with a dominant number of females in a Parliament of Barbados, and in this term certainly, to have to look at things differently, because whether it is street lighting or whether it is the removal of bush, these are things that they impact everybody, but in particular they impact particularly women in our country who have to traverse a lot of these areas and who, out of fear, sometimes, are cautious about traveling certain areas because of this overgrowth of bush. So I am not alarmed by what the Honourable Member says, because as I told this House before, I have no record of any roads complained of, and I suspect that none of the other ministers have any correspondence, text messages of any complaints on behalf of residents of Christchurch South. So I am not alarmed when I hear the Honourable Member speak, because I know that he has not collided with the realities of day-to-day ordinary people in this country. We've come to represent the people and to do right by the people. And I believe that this piece of legislation is quite transformative. As we heard, there have been a number of attempts to try to attach it to the land tax bill. There's been pushback from that. And we've tried to expend significant sums of monies over the years to be able, as government, to respond to every lot that needs clearing without any real systematic way of cleaning the country. I think this gives us an opportunity where, in shifting the burden, we are able now to share the responsibility better of the areas that are under the state's control. And I want the public to understand that while we are imposing the burden on landowners to clean their properties, this legislation also binds the state. And the state, therefore, also has to pay attention to the nuisances that are created by the state, whether in relation to derelict buildings owned by the state, whether it is in relation to properties owned by the states, and in particular on housing estates as well, Mr. Speaker, because that is perhaps, for me, certainly one of the biggest challenges, and I know for other colleagues who have housing estates, trying to get the National Housing Corporation to be equipped enough to respond to a number of the dark spaces, a number of the areas where there are overgrown lots, where there are units in many areas which have been handed over, in a sense, under the 20-year program, but for different reasons, for many reasons, the persons are unable to have the financial resources to repair the house that they may have inherited. The elderly person is deceased and they have inherited the house, but they do not have the means to be able to renovate and to retrofit the house to get it back in a reasonable condition. As a consequence, across all of our housing estates, we have a number of buildings that you see run down. And as a consequence, you have people constantly asking, how can I get access to housing across the country? People come to me with a list of all of the vacant lots in my constituency, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure it is in others as well, indicating that they see a house, but they don't see any activity. It has been overgrown with bush for many years. The building is derelict, but nothing is happening, and they don't understand why nothing is happening in relation to from government, or why it isn't happening in relation to the property owner. And I'm always at pains to try to explain to people that obviously we can't just go and take up anybody's property. And therefore there must be a process, there must be legislation in place to allow us to be able to follow a process of notifying landowners that the lot needs to be clear, and therefore a way of, after the government is able to clear the lands, to be able to recoup those monies, whether from the estate or from the individual owner. This legislation gives us that opportunity now to be able to do that. But it also places a responsibility on government, and certainly the state, to ensure that it keeps its premises equally clean. Because we won't want to have the imbalance where we are telling landowners that they must do X, but government is also not doing what it is supposed to do. So I trust that even as we reflect on this year's estimates, that the relevant provisions will be made in respect of the equipment, certainly equipment needs in various ministries, but also a new model that we have certainly employed within the Ministry of Transport and Works, which is to look at having lots of roads basically identified, and subcontracting small contractors, medium-sized contractors across this country to be able to clean those lots of land. And I speak to that program, Mr. Speaker, because at every opportunity the Prime Minister has spoken on this issue of our retooling and retraining people across this country, she has spoken to this, what we call bush legislation informally, as being an opportunity for ordinary Barbadians who may be supplying services to government or looking to get into the area of supplying services to government, to put themselves in a position now, once this legislation is enacted, to now create an opportunity for them to offer their services to clean a number of these lots. We are fortunate that in MTW we now have 15 contractors, small contractors working across the country in every single parish. We have the roads being cleaned. We have new routes being added daily. We have the opportunity come the 1st of April to ensure that we continue this program and also to accelerate this program. And why, Mr. Speaker? Because this government has invested in its people. We have not just said, let's hire a couple people, give them a few dollars to be able to clean the roads, and then we leave them, and at some point the program is going to be terminated and we don't look back. We recognize that we were not getting the efficiencies within the Ministry of Transport and Works. And we recognize that if we empowered people, ordinary Bajans, to be able to take control of a team of persons and equipment, that they would perhaps be better suited with that opportunity to be able to clean. And why? Because if the boss man is making sure that when he cleans that road, he's getting paid, he's going to be responsible for the people under him, and he's going to make sure that those persons carry out an honest day's work. We haven't seen those results when the flip side has been on the side of government, where we are responsible for making sure that people work. And therefore, in shifting responsibility, what we have seen is that now people have a spirit, a greater spirit rather, of entrepreneurship. Because the truth is, I think there are many more entrepreneurs out there than we give ourselves credit for. But when we don't create the opportunities for people to have a platform to be entrepreneurial, then that is where we're never quite sure whether we have to bring somebody from the outside or whether those opportunities will in fact be taken up. But I can say with all sincerity that I have seen a desire on the part of our people to get involved, certainly in the cleanup program and in other programs within the Ministry of Transport and Works. And I hope that by our training of these individuals, because we are putting them into programs to be able to train them not only in safety on the road, but to ensure that they are able to manage their businesses, that they're able to offer their services, not just to MTW, but they're able to offer their services to other government agencies. They're able to offer their services to other companies across the country. And hopefully they will be able to see themselves potentially with the information and the education that we're giving to them to be able to look outside of Barbados through CARICOM and globally to be able to expand their businesses. But what we have done as a government is what we have said we came to office to do, not to leave people behind, to be able to see people where they are and to be able to empower them to do better than how we found them. And so many of these persons have taken up the training. Actually, all of them are in the training programs, not just the owners of businesses, but also the employees that they have engaged to actually work within the program. And therefore, we have the opportunity now, with this particular piece of legislation, to empower persons on that program and certainly across NHC and NCC to also see themselves, now that they have the skills from the ASH worker program and the training that we did on in terms of landscaping, to see themselves now as being the persons who will have an opportunity for the same landowners that are covered under this legislation that we are asking to clear their lots, to ensure that they are in a position to be able to get a piece of the work to keep this country clean. That is how, Mr. Speaker, you empower a nation. You don't continue to do things and business as usual. And I know that is why it is difficult for the other side to reconcile all that we are doing. The last member that spoke about the Gully Project. It is about empowering people. The seaweed project came on board because we had to ensure that we cleaned our beaches and make sure that the seaweed was disposed of. But what did we do? We didn't send home people. We transferred those persons to be able to engage in work on the Gullies project. And why are we doing the Gullies project, Mr. Speaker? Because just like we are here today to talk about bush on open spaces and talk about derelict buildings and how these are nuisances to ordinary Barbadians, equally our gullies, we find a lot of debris, a lot of plastics within the gullies that have led us to the point where we recognize that these things are cluttering the drains. These things are creating breeding grounds for mosquitoes. They are creating all of the issues that then cause honorable members in this house who have responsibility for health to struggle daily at the hospital because there are all kinds of outbreaks as a result of these diseases that arise as a result of this debris. When the drainage unit is cleaning the drains, Mr. Speaker, you will be surprised at what we find. From plastics to the disposable plastic plates and cups, we find all kinds of debris, metals, we find clothing, all kinds of things that you can think of. And it is because Barbadians have not properly disposed of, in many cases, of their garbage. Now, the truth is we still have a lot more work to do in relation to our public education, because while we have implemented the garbage cans at the various premises, the recycling program that has been before Cabinet, and I know the Honourable Minister is trying to make some way in terms of getting the recycling program going. But all of these things must be seen as an ecosystem of trying to improve the cleanliness of the country, because the impact on the country is so grave in terms of our own ability, particularly in hurricane season, to ensure that we do not lose lives as well. So gullies may seem, odd to some people, But we recognize in our gullies, if we don't clear them, the water is not going to flow to the sea in the way that it ought to. We also recognize that with the intensity of the rainfall, if we don't capture the water in some of these areas with digging new wells, that it has an impact on the households that are in the surrounding areas, because you have intense water hitting a number of these households and causing obviously challenges for a number of residents in the areas. So we are not just talking about climate change in a vacuum. Planting trees is part of the efforts that we are making in relation to climate change. Doing the work within the gullies is also part of it. Ensuring that we clean up our beaches is also part of it. Cleaning our roads is also a part of, you know, the battle that we are facing in relation to climate change, but it is also an attendant issue in relation to the safety of our people. So again, I understand it troubles the honourable member that we are making the headway in terms of things that we promised the people, and that we haven't just come here, as he wanted to make it seem that we're here just simply to talk about tall grass. But I do agree with him in relation to one matter, and it is the fact that one of the challenges that we've had as a government, over successive governments rather, is the issue of enforcement. Because while this legislation and the regulations in principle are transformational, the one thing that we must always do is make sure that we have people to enforce. Because while we have people to clean, we still need to make sure that we have the relevant persons going out to identify the lots and to do the ticketing to ensure that these persons are brought before the relevant authorities for the overgrowth of lots. And therefore, I do agree that the public health inspectors may need to be increased in order to be able to address this, or that mechanisms need to be put in place where the public can, in a sense, be the watchdogs, where they identify that there are overgrown lots, that they are reported through a portal, so that action can be taken. Because technology nowadays also allows for us to be better able to identify problems. In MTW, the public is very good at sending me and the entire ministry, you know, videos of broken culverts, of you know, potholes, of streetlights that want fixing. And so while we must increase the expertise within the public health inspectorate, we also have a responsibility to use technology in a way that allows for faster access by the public, given the times that we live in, to be able to report issues, but also equally to have the mechanism in place to be able to respond to those concerns that the general public may also have. And so I think that once we are able to address it, because we haven't been very good at addressing it in relation to planning matters, there are several, you know, houses and structures created all across the country that clearly have escaped, whether it's in particular on the estates, have escaped the eyes of enforcement. And we have a major problem with this across the country, and I really do feel that there must be additional resources provided for enforcement, whether it is the cameras, whether it is, as I said, in the form of technology, or whether it is in the form of individuals to be able to assist in ensuring that things do not escalate and get out of control, because we are very good at identifying the issues when they have gotten out of control, rather than putting the systems in place before they get out of control. So I would urge that we act quickly to ensure that those resources, whatever they may be, are put in place to support this particular piece of legislation. Mr. Speaker, I will continue to advocate for the cleanliness of this country. I was an environmentalist in my younger days, myself and a couple others, the leader of the Senate, were part of an environmental group. We understood very well then, as we do now, what our responsibilities are, not just as legislators, but certainly when we were ordinary citizens trying to educate young people at the time about what the importance of protecting the environment. And so I stand firmly behind this report, the recommendations that have been made, as much as the Honourable Member for Christchurch South sought to give the impression that no PR came from the Government Information Service. What he did not say is that the actual report spoke to a recommendation that public education needed to accompany the passage of the legislation. It wasn't about what was going on within the committee in terms of the discussions of the committee. Several people, over 30 persons, I believe, and entities were invited to contribute. So the issue of people not knowing about the bill is really not a concern. I think what we all accept is that with every piece of legislation that is passed, and to the credit of the Attorney General and his team, we have passed significant sums of legislation over the course of the last years that we've been in office. The truth is that we need additional public education on each occasion to educate the public about the pros and the cons of the legislation, how it will impact on them. And so this legislation obviously will have its attendant public education campaign, both from GIS and I'm sure all of the public relations attached to the relevant ministry, to ensure that the public understands their responsibilities, and equally that the state is equally involved in now being able to focus its resources on the things that it needs to. So, Mr. Speaker, that is my contribution for today. I am being asked by the Attorney General to bring this debate to an end, and I therefore beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This resolution stands passed. Honourable member for St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that you do not leave the chair and that this House, what?
Have to move.
Beg to move that it passes, beg to move this bill be passed be read a second time, sorry.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and that this House resolve itself in the committee for further consideration of the bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself in the committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. And methinks the ayes have it.
This Honourable House is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the objects and reasons section of this bill be amended as follows: that at the end of clause B, we remove the full stop, replace it with a semicolon, and add the following words: and, open bracket, C, close brackets, so it's a third one. Provide for the disposal of dead bodies abandoned at health service institutions. Beg to move that this objects and reasons be amended as read.
The question is that the objects and reasons be amended as read. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 1.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that clause 1 be amended to replace the year 2024 with the year 2025.
Beg second. The question is that clause 1 as amended stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move the addition of a new subclause B of clause 2 to provide the following words, deleting the definition of minister, and then that the ensuing clauses be renumbered accordingly.
The question is that clause 2 as amended stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. All honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clause 3 stand part.
The question is that clause 3 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 4.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move an amendment at clause 4 to provide the following language. And I quote, section 10(1) of the Principal Act is amended by A, deleting paragraph U and substituting the following. U, respecting 1, the internment of the dead, 2, the entry of dead bodies into Barbados, 3, the use of dead bodies for the teaching of anatomy to medical students, and the final disposal of those bodies. Roman numeral 4, the inspection of undertaking establishments, morgues, crematoria, and other places used in connection with the preparation, transportation, and disposal of dead bodies. And 5, Roman numeral 5, the disposal of dead bodies abandoned at health services institutions. And B, inserting immediately after paragraph Y, the following paragraph, Y1, annexing to the contravention of or failure to comply with regulations made under section 10(1)D of the Health Services Act, cap 44, an administrative penalty. Mr. Speaker, it isn't generally found that in committee we actually debate amendments, but I believe it is important for me to use this opportunity and this right to propose to explain to the chamber the reason for this amendment. Mr. Speaker, the only thing that we are adding here is the language found at V, the disposal of dead bodies abandoned at health services institutions. The Ministry of Health has indicated, Mr. Chairman, that there is a significant accumulation of dead bodies going back, in many instances, years. In fact, when I became AG in 2018 again, there was a situation where there was a dead body of a person who, from overseas, a visitor, who unfortunately passed away in Barbados, and because the fund refused to claim the body, we actually kept that body for a period of over 20 years in the morgue. Of course, by then, I believe it was completely desiccated. But we are finding, Mr. Speaker, that more and more, for a variety of reasons, individuals are simply abandoning bodies in the morgue, and that, of course, comes with its own challenges. And therefore, the minister wants to be able to make regulations which would, it is anticipated, allow for the disposal of those dead bodies by the state after an inordinately long period of time. But those are regulations that will come. At this point in time, they have not been considered in terms of how long and what the procedure would be, but it is important to make this amendment, and rather than coming back to the House later in the month or later in the year to make such a simple amendment, it was determined that we would make this amendment in committee. This amendment was not covered in the report because it did not form part of that. But because it was an amendment to the Health Services Act, we felt it was more convenient just to make it at this time. So just to repeat, it is simply to allow the minister to make regulations for the disposal of dead bodies abandoned at health services institutions. The drafting technique here is to remove the entire clause and substitute it with a new clause, rather than just trying to tack in a new Roman numeral 5. I hope that explanation accords with the support of the chamber. I beg to move that clause 4 is amended, stand part.
The question is that clause 4 as amended. Stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. All members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 5.
Question is that clause 5 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clause 6 stand part.
Question is that clause 6 stand par. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clause 7 stand part.
The question is that clause 7 stand par. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the schedule be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the schedule be the schedule to the bill. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report the passing of one bill with amendments in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee. Honorable Member St. Joseph. The question is that this bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Health Services Amendment Act of 2025.
The question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Next week, I hear.
He's there? Point first. Yes.
Order number 5, sir. In the name of the Honourable Minister, Sean, Minister and Minister of Finance, to move the second reading of the Foreign Currency Permits Bill 2024.
Honorable Member for Christchurch, East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The business before the chamber, as you would recall, sir, it originates from the early set of reforms that the government pursued in 2018, where we regularized, if you like, sir, the convergence of our tax system, given the nature of what we found when we came to office. And since then, as you are aware, sir, we have had further reform within that space. And therefore, the bill that is here, sir, is to try to make sure that as we regularize the operations in relation to how business is done in Barbados, there's a set of companies, sir, that the way that, and this is really to improve a lot of the administrative issues that have arisen with respect to Barbados. And one, demonstrating economic substance in some areas, given that the perception of what was happening in Barbados, sir, was that we were some type of haven, which we know that we are not. And therefore, in the course of those reforms, we've had to do some things that allowed us to be capable of demonstrating that we were indeed not a tax haven, and that our rate of tax was commensurate with clearly our public policy objectives. Now, having done the substantive reform with respect to the OECD global minimum tax last year, sir, we've been able to put some of those regulatory issues behind us, and therefore the bill before the chamber in that vein, sir, is to make sure that as we move forward under a new regime, which over the course of the last few days might prove to be a little bit of a challenge given what we've seen happening elsewhere. But notwithstanding that, sir, the way that we have been monitoring and we are moving to make that much more seamless in relation to the bill that's before the chamber here this evening. So it speaks to the bill is the foreign currency permit, sir, and as many Bajans may be aware, there are some companies that earn 100%, sir, of their business entirely outside of Barbados. And with that, sir, the ability to be able to, one, as we are now in a position to do, is clearly demonstrate that those entities have substantive business in Barbados on the one hand, but capable of ensuring now that with respect to compliance, so to speak, that we're in a position then to be able to demonstrate through what the Revenue Authority is doing with other regulatory agencies like the Director of International Business and other agencies to be able to show that Barbados is compliant, following the rules, in order to make sure that there is no evidence of profit shifting with respect to the global minimum tax or any other of those issues. And so the bill before the Chamber, Mr. Speaker, really is to just regularize what has been an internal process with respect to the manner in which certain benefits were granted to persons who fit the category of a foreign currency permit, and therefore that activity which in the past, Mr. Speaker, people would refer to these entities as being offshore. When we converge, we say that all business is local effectively, sir, and that to the extent that we were able to further regularize what benefits would accrue to said companies, given that we had to grandfather quite a number of the entities based on their operations here in Barbados, that we wanted to make sure that everything is in place and to be able to seamlessly allow more business to come to Barbados, employ Barbadians, and there are several companies who employ Barbadians and do global business. And therefore, to the extent that the operations in Barbados receive these benefits in a seamless fashion, we've already converged with respect to the global minimum tax rates as we did last year, Mr. Speaker, in this chamber, and with the passage of that legislation. And therefore, this piece of legislation this afternoon is, as I said, is really to not just further outline, well, not outline, but the process through which one is granted a foreign currency permit. It is for 12 months, sir, so you have to show 100% of your business is done outside of the country, sir. And as we work on the other compliance matters, Mrs. Speaker, that we are equally able to demonstrate that all business and all entities are paying the appropriate tax based on the jurisdiction within which they may originally come from. But to the extent that all the administrative arrangements are in place, we've been able to settle those internally with respect to the exchange of information, all of those issues, sir. And therefore, this piece of legislation today was seeking to repeal the original bill that was passed in 2018, is really down to make sure that not just with respect to the granting of the permits, but with respect to clause 10, that the exemptions with respect to the manner in which they operate in Barbados, with respect to VAT on as well as import duty with respect to equipment and stuff that they need to import to operate from Barbados, because there are a range of entities that do very different things. For example, there's a company that is doing, you know, when we were growing up, sir, we had Donkey Kong and Pac-Man and these types of things that we had to do. You had to go into the arcade, so to speak, and do manually. There's an entity here that is employing about 200 Bajans, who is, their sole purpose, sir, is to debug, program, video games right here in Barbados. And therefore, as they had to import the equipment and stuff to be able to set that type of business up, obviously we, under this policy framework, allow them to be able to get the equipment in any manner in which the clause 10 is referring, in order to ensure that those 200 Bajans can be employed in a very different way. And therefore, as online gaming has become a sort of global business, Mr. Speaker, we certainly expect that Barbados will be in a position to help meet some of that demand. And hopefully, sir, in the future, that would mean, I hope, that we can also encourage Barbadians to also start programming and be able to deliver some of this content in that space. And therefore, there are many types of businesses that, in this instance, will qualify to meet the designation of a foreign currency permit. We are 100%, as I said, of your business is being done outside of Barbados, following the export thrust of the country, and therefore we're confident that this piece of legislation will allow for a much more seamless approach to businesses who have to invest and to be able to operate from Barbados. And that's really the essence of what we are doing here in order to make sure that when we talk about doing business, that it is as seamless as possible, now that we've been able to settle those institutional tax arrangements with respect to being able to, the country being able to self-certify and allowing us then to put Barbados from a competitiveness perspective to be able to remove some of the hurdles that we had to put in place to prove economic substance when we had originally converged in December of 2018. And so, sir, this piece of legislation is relatively straightforward, and we hope that we are in a position to ensure that more entities, and as I said, there is quite a broad spectrum of activity, but we really want to have more entities of the type that will engage young Barbadians, but some not so young, in some of these areas to be able to engage in what has become a billion-dollar industry in relation to online gaming. But as I said, there's a wide cross-section of entities that we want to be able to come to Barbados to be able to help drive growth and to allow Barbadians to know that the work that is possible right across the spectrum, that you can work for companies that are global right here in Barbados in order to ensure that persons also don't have to rely specifically, sir, on the domestic growth alone in relation to being able to have employment. And to the extent that the skills that these people will be able to acquire now allows them to be able to earn much more than they would ordinarily, sir, with respect to the normal operations of the economy. So whilst we are focusing on building out a more robust domestic space, we're equally trying to make sure that the, pieces of legislation like these, which will be critical for attracting businesses to come here and to operate seamlessly, that is the thrust that we are trying to make sure that we can execute and do so in a relatively seamless manner, so that I suppose the lag time that it takes to get stuff approved and stuck in the port and these types of things, those days will be over, sir, in relation to the passage of this piece of legislation. So with those very, 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 very few words, sir, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
I'm obliged to you, sir. Your Honor, I will remain consistent with the honourable member's quest for brevity. I don't think we need to be here at midnight tonight on a matter such as this. And I say that because I recorded in writing what the honourable member told this chamber a few minutes ago, and I quote, when the honourable member for Christchurch East Central makes reference to the purpose of the legislation, I record him to have said that the bill, and I quote, the bill seeks to regularize the manner in which certain privileges are granted. The operative word there is regularize. And when I move from that statement of the honourable members and I go to the legislation itself, let me read what the legislation says under its long title: an act to make better provision for the grant of a foreign currency permit to any qualified person that earns 100%
of its annual income in foreign currency and for related matters, so that while the text of the legislation reads with more words than what the honourable member said, I don't think there's any inconsistency between that long title or the purpose of the bill and what the honourable member said, viva voce. One would wish, though, to remind the public that in a jurisdiction such as this, in an open economy, the access or the presence, even if the access does not exist, the presence of foreign currency in economies such as these ones and such as is Barbados is critical. And the regularization of entities that deal almost exclusively in foreign currency, there ought to be some regularization, and not only regularization, but if a company chooses to come here, and they ought to be protected. And I want to focus on that issue of protection. Before I go directly to the issue of protection, though, one laments the loss of a significant portion of business in this area. I'm willing to be corrected that this area of business used to earn this country, I think, I don't have this written anywhere, but about $500 million per year. That figure has shrunk, and I must confess that listening to the honourable member, his tone did not stir a spirit, to quote Shakespeare. There seemed to be a lack of excitement, and if there's that lack of excitement, maybe he is joining with me in a lament that we really have lost too much of this business, and we need to regain that business in the what we call the offshore sector. And I know that privately a lot of us professionals look on at the Cayman Islands and Turks and Caicos and the British Virgin Islands with some envy that they seem to have developed their industries, and they seem to have kept their industries for one reason or another, and I'm not going to cast blame anywhere, but the reality that we must explain to Barbadians is that we have lost a significant amount of that foreign business. And you are aware, sir, that that foreign business used to give quite comfortable professional lives to our young lawyers and our young accountants, and I would think even our young corporate secretaries. And if we lose that business, they lose their professional endeavor in this country, and they lose a professional career in this country. So that a government must always try to preserve that area of business. A government must always try to protect that area of business as a means of protecting our young people, and not so young people sometimes, who have found a good living in that area of work. Now, I know that the government has not yet accustomed itself to criticism, and I can understand that. The government has rested on a very large majority, and criticism has tended to be absent. I mean, in that there was hardly any criticism, there was hardly any self-examination. one philosopher may well have said that the unexamined life is not worth living. And to make life worth living, one must always examine oneself, and that includes a government. A government without the access to self-examination is always likely to be a government that will lose its way. So that if it becomes my responsibility to criticize, I think I must do that, so that the government remembers that it is not perfect. And perhaps the government may be more comfortable with the word critique. You offer a critique so that persons who are afraid of criticism will sit a little more comfortably in their chairs and accept that sometimes perfection, in fact, not sometimes, perfection always eludes frail humanity, and that is, we're all frail in our humanity. So that, permit me to ask a few questions, permit me to do a brief critique of what is before this House this afternoon. And I have indicated to the public, and I've quoted the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central, I have quoted the legislation itself, the proposed legislation, the bill itself, and the public now understands, I hope, what this legislation is attempting to do. And as I've said, the Honourable Minister spoke of regularizing the manner in which certain privileges are granted, so that this legislation is concerning itself with the granting of privileges to foreign companies or companies that come here and reside in this country and offer some benefits, considerable benefits to this country, and therefore we grant them privileges with the hope that we will also protect them, and as I've said before, extend that protection into professional opportunity for our own indigenous citizens. And so that is where this legislation finds us this afternoon as a parliament. I think I should also explain to the public, since this legislation is replacing earlier legislation, that earlier legislation is called the Foreign Currency Permits Act 2018. Normally when legislation repeals earlier legislation, it's rather old. And 7 years later, one cannot describe the existing legislation, which is due to be repealed. One cannot say that the passage of 7 years is a particularly long time, but it becomes a long time in a dynamic environment, in an environment where business practice and so on changes at a very rapid pace. So I would want to tell the public that the repeal of legislation 7 years later in an environment, a business environment, in a dynamic business environment, can be a fairly long time. Things move quickly, things move rapidly, there's rapid change in this area of business. So 7 years later is not the short time that it appears to be. If it were another area of law, sometimes these parliaments come and repeal legislation, as this parliament, I beg your pardon, did with the Bail Act some 24 years later, or almost a quarter century later. And that can stand as an example for the usefulness of legislation, that legislation extended itself across 25 years, across a quarter century, and the dynamics of the criminal environment necessitated change a quarter century later. Of course, I need not repeat that in that matter, I was somewhat disappointed with the new legislation that came, but that is not before this chamber now. What is before this chamber now is this legislation that pertains to the issue of foreign currency. And we did make the point that foreign currency is vital to this country. I know that a former governor of the central bank, has sought to add to this debate by proposing dollarization. I have no comment to make on that. I would merely invite the economists in this chamber at some propitious time to express themselves and to educate the people of Barbados on the issue of dollarization. Economics, I beg your pardon, is such a specialty area that we always discourage our economists from hiding their considerable lights under their academic bushels and to come out and say what they feel about certain initiatives. And I am very keen to hear the economists, certainly in this chamber, in this assembly, use their positions, use their voices of authority to say how they feel about that matter of dollarization that a previous governor of the central bank spoke about a few weeks ago. We all sit as an audience with great excitement to hear what the economists will tell the people of Barbados. I say that too because we know that there are other countries in this region, Turks and Caicos, for example. The US dollar is their local dollar. Cayman, they have their dollar, but that dollar is apparently on par and perhaps a few units, minor units higher than the US dollar. But it is a discussion that I invite the government to participate in at some point, not only in terms of educating the people of Barbados, but also for the purpose of telling the people of Barbados what is the government's policy position in the light of what a former governor of the central bank has said. And I am aware that this government has access to the advice of economists, and we sit and wait and await that discourse. Now, I was at the point of the key difference between this act and the one that the 2018 act that it intends to replace. And I am advised that the key difference between the act to be repealed and the bill with which the government will replace that act is that the new legislation would grant complete exemption of duty tax or other imposts on capital goods that are imported for use in the ordinary course of business of the entity or individual that generates, and this is important, 100% of income in foreign exchange. Again, the critical focus is on foreign exchange, and where you are generating 100% of foreign exchange, there's a sense in which you become special. Again, in an economy where foreign exchange is so critical, the public knows that you can't spend the Barbadian dollar in New York or London, nor even Lagos, that the presence of foreign exchange around here is critical to this country's survival. And so the act, as the Honourable Minister says, regularizes the manner in which we grant privileges to the entities that do 100% foreign exchange business. And the Honourable Minister also would have educated the public when he said that the purpose really is to allow more business to come to Barbados, so that you're granting these privileges as an incentive, and the public needs to hear this. And that is commendable, and the intent is commendable. I suppose 1 year from now, we will judge as to the success of that intent. But look, as patriotic Barbadians, we all join in the hope that this country will become more prosperous than it is now. And one cannot say that prosperity is a part of the contemporary experience of this country. A lot of people are struggling. And if we can attract more businesses like this to this country, it may alleviate the hardship that is confronting too many Barbadians. I beg your pardon, sir. So that the intent is commendable, and we join with the government in seeking to create an environment in which people are happy, and happiness derives from one's material circumstances as well as one's social and spiritual circumstances as well. We are not exclusively physical beings. We are also spiritual beings. But I'm not here to preach the sermon that the Honourable Member for St. Peter would ordinarily preach on Saturdays. That is, I leave that for him. I will just come to one or two technical areas within the legislation, and Section 10, to which the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central made a reference. That is the section that attracts one's attention. And Section 10.3, let me read it, Your Honour, so that the public knows what we're talking about. We should never become so abstract in here that the public starts to believe that we talk to each other. We're really in here talking to the public, and the public needs to know what is this business, and that this business should not be the business that is abstract and exclusive to 30 parliamentarians, including a speaker. Section 10, subsection 3 reads, and I quote, Your Honour, with your permission, where a holder of a foreign currency permit imports under this section any materials, goods or articles free of any duty, tax or other imposts, those materials, goods or articles shall not be sold or disposed of otherwise than in the ordinary course of the business of the holder of the permit until after the expiration of 5 years from the date of importation. I could go on to read the remainder, but I will pause there and say to the public, through you, Your Honour, that this essentially is a matter of curbing an entity from disposing of its assets, disposing of its equipment within a period of 5 years. Of course, the usual thing, like cars, for example, let the public hear this, that a person, returning national, we call them, they bring their car in and they get the duty-free concession, and I believe the law prohibits them from reselling that car within a certain period of time. So this is not dissimilar, and I should say positively, this is similar, that you're asking the business not to dispose of its property, not to alienate its property in a period less than 5 years. I wonder if this particular provision was not influenced by the motor vehicle industry. We tend to, we in Barbados, we value a car very, very highly. A car, we speak of a house, a car, in order of the value which we place on our possessions, and a house and car. The house is first, the car is second. So we attach a very high social value to cars. And I wonder if this provision was not contemplating car values, because at 5 years, the average owner tends to think, well, he no longer has a car of value, he no longer has what he would like to term a new car. And one wonders if, outside of motor vehicles, if that provision or that stipulation for a 5-year cutoff point may not be arbitrary. And if it is not arbitrary, one wonders if it isn't influenced by the value, not only the material value, but the social value that we place on cars. Why 5 years? Might it not be attached, and this is constructive criticism, this is a critique. Might it not have attached itself? Might it not be arbitrary? And if it is not arbitrary, I repeat, is it associated with cars and the value of cars, material value of cars, and the social value of cars? Certainly there is equipment that depreciates at a slower rate than a car, for example. And one wonders if that period should not be linked to the useful life of the machinery or the equipment. Surely there's these companies that come here, I don't think they bring cheap equipment here. They tend to bring fairly good equipment here. And one wonders if that period in which the entity is prohibited from alienating the product or alienating the equipment should not attach itself to the issue of depreciation. If the equipment depreciates reasonably, 7 years, 10 years, as I said, some equipment is more durable. The word I'm looking for there is durability. Some equipment is more durable. But the government chooses 5 years, and we wonder if, and I would look at it on both sides. Is it too short or is it too long? Or is it arbitrary? And that is a question we ask because the government should anticipate that a company may ask the question, unless of course consultation was done within the offshore sector, and that suggestion of 5 years was put to the government. So that is section 10, subsection 3 of what will become a new act of parliament. Of course, the public will hear that the entity will be allowed to sell the commodity, the equipment, within that 5-year period if that company sells to another company involved within the sector. I want to come to another provision which may attract your Honor's attention. Beg your pardon, sir. Beg your pardon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 6:25.
Please say aye. Those against, please say no. This Honourable Chairman stands suspended for 5 minutes.